So let's try this all over again. Good afternoon. Let's get started. It's April 19th, 2023. Time now is 4:08 p.m. In attendance, Director Daniels, Director Art, Director Mel Hackham, Director Nelson, Director Loma, Director Bankus is joining us remotely, and today Director Jurgensen is also playing dad duty. Congratulations to Director Jurgensen. He had his new baby just a couple of days back. So healthy, mom and baby are healthy, so he is at home and joining us remotely. And we also have Superintendent Gall and his administrative team, and also several people from SELA that's joining us. The first item on today's agenda is the charter school application that the board is considering at this point in time for SELA. And this was brought as a non-action item at last week's board meeting. The board got to hear the presentation from SELA, and we do have, I see at least 3 people from SELA here joining us today, and I will hand it over to you in a minute. So today, the board gets to have a little bit more discussion on some of the questions that were raised at that point, and the idea was that you can have the first 15 or 20 minutes, whatever you need, to answer some of the questions that were already posed at the board meeting last week, and then we can open it up for the rest of the board discussion at that point. Okay, I'm going to hand it over to Superintendent Gall. Superintendent Gall, do you need to introduce them? Or
yes, Scott, I'll ask you to introduce the team.
Sure. Matt, Barbara, Diana. Diane, I'm so sorry. So we've got board chair, principal, and chief finance officer? Ish. If you're not, you are now. So I just want a little cut. Yeah. So honestly, they're ready to go. They have some other materials, but they're ready to answer any questions. Barbara, I don't know if you wanted to jump into some things that you wanted to address right away, or just open it up. It's totally.
Either way works for me. I do have notes on a few of the questions that came up last session, including the middle school. I believe, Director Ott, you had questions about why we closed the middle school and how we, what we would do in the future to improve.
I don't know if that was me exactly. am curious in general what the DAC asked, what your responses would be. So absolutely, I think that's one of them. And I'm interested in hearing the answer.
Okay, yeah, we can start with that. So our middle school closed in 2019. And the main reason for it was that it was very small. We only had a total of 38 students for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And we were unable to provide them, in our opinion, with a appropriate middle school experience. So we didn't have any after-school sports or activities. The building was not really fit to house 2 different types of schools. So the middle schoolers were in the building with the elementary school kids, and you could tell they weren't really happy about that either. It's not the experience they had. The other thing was the programming too. So we wanted to keep immersion up, but we couldn't do it to an extent that we wanted to. So the decision was made that we will focus and put the emphasis on getting a solid elementary school program going. And then, in later years, develop a comprehensive plan on how to introduce a middle school back for our community. But there's certain things that we had to think about, like staffing as well, because, it requires exponentially more staff to run a middle school program than it does the elementary school program. But what would immersion look like? How would we fit that in order to also being able to address all the other subjects that we need to teach? Yeah. So these are some of the things that we will think about, and that are on our strategic plan for the future. So before we do start one, we want to have all of these things in place and be certain before we open it up again.
And if I can ask, do you have, if it's all right, since it's on that topic, do you have a long-term plan on when you might want to add it then at this point?
I can speak to that. So we actually have a strategic planning session coming up in, I think, 2 weeks where our board will discuss that. Our old strategic plan is coming to an end, 3-year strategic plan is coming to an end. So we do want to put together a new strategic plan that will include that. We will certainly discuss whether we want to add another language. That is something that has been asked quite a bit from parents, so we'll explore that a little bit. And the other topic that we want to explore is facility. That's the third thing that seems to come up quite a bit as a point of topic. So we'll be looking at all of those probably in 2 weeks and come up with a strategic plan focused on those things.
What was the third thing that you mentioned? I didn't hear you.
Facilities.
Facilities. Okay, sounds good.
So yeah, facility is kind of the precursor of starting a middle school again. So when we are in a place, regardless of what is going to happen with our application, we are looking at relocating at some point and making sure the facilities that we get or that we lease or purchase or build, whatever happens, are suitable for a middle school. So I think realistically we're talking not within the next 5 years at least. Say 3 to 5.
3 to 5
Yeah.
is what we're looking at.
Can you describe briefly some of the facility challenges that you all have now? I've been to your campus a couple of times.
Briefly?
Yes. So we are we're leasing a building from Pulpit Rock Church. That means we're sharing the building with
Tell
them.
them right where it is too.
It's on Austin Bluffs in Nevada, kind of catty corner from UCCS. Colorado Christian School is right there too. It's a nice facility, but it is built to be a church. So it is built around a sanctuary or an auditorium. Everything is carpeted, which is, one of a small negative point, but still, if you run an elementary school, there will be spills. So it's carpeted. We don't really have a gym. We have a student center that we use as a gym. It's like a multi-purpose room. We use it as a cafeteria and a gym and a music room, but we don't have a nice gym where we could offer, basketball or any of that. We have a small field outside, so we don't really have a big field either. With a track, to offer, we do offer PE outside, but of course it would be way nicer if we actually had a full-sized field where we can play soccer and all of that. The church still occupies some of the offices upstairs. They are separated from us, and that also leads me to a question I think that Dak had about safety. They have a completely separate entrance from us, and they are not anywhere, in our building, in our rooms. They have their own separate entrance with their offices right there. But still, the biggest challenge really is that our teachers are never able to decorate their rooms in the way that they want, because we flip twice a week, what we call flipping. So on Wednesdays, the church comes in, takes everything off that is school related, or puts up curtains on the walls, because they have, groups or Bible study, youth groups and all of that. And we come in on Thursday morning and everything is back to how it was. But sometimes there's issues because the rooms are not set back the same way, teachers get annoyed, things are missing or misplaced. Same happens on Fridays or over the weekend. So Friday they come in, our teachers prepare a little bit, so it takes a little bit of work on our part. And the rest is done by the church, but they, like I said, they do, they flip the room. They get rid of everything educational that's in there, and then on Sunday night they get rid of everything religious that's in there, because we're a public school, so not affiliated with the church at all. We have a good partnership with them, so we make it work, but it's not ideal.
What do you pay in rent now? Is that information that you can share?
Our current rent factor is $403,000 this year.
Per
For the
year.
whole year?
Yes.
And so are you looking for then, what's the capacity of that? How many students can you fit in that area right now?
So we currently in the full-time program have about 270, 275, and then we also have a homeschool enrichment program. So on some days we have up to 300 kids in the building. I think we could add another maybe 2 classrooms, 2 or 3. We're pretty tight on space right now.
That'd be about 40 more kids, something in that,
40 to 60, yeah.
40 to 60 more kids. Okay.
Yeah.
And are you looking then for a different facility at this time? I think there was some talk about even District 11, if we had any free buildings or something like that. Are you actively looking for some in the community?
We're not actively looking. I think that we want to wait for it to be formalized on our strategic plan. I would be willing to bet that within the next 6 to 12 months, we'll be putting together a committee to start actively looking for alternative facilities. We are currently in the midst of, I think we're 1 of 3 years into
One
our
of
lease.
two
With
with
an
an
option.
option for 2 more.
Yeah.
Is what our current lease says.
Yes, but getting a building also will require us to apply for grants. And I know this is a lengthy process, so this is why we opted for the 2-year plus the option of another year and another year, just to give us a little more time. Because I know we're not going to apply for a grant and, get it right away. It's just not very likely.
So the reason the middle school closed previously was because of low participation, you said about 38 students.
Yeah.
And then you didn't have enough resources and staffing to support the 38 students who were there.
Can you all also talk a little bit about that break from the original charter into now the localized solution? I think it was Globe International. Seemed like that happened consistent at about that time.
Yeah, that happened in the same year. I think the year prior, 2018, our board tried to separate from GBCC, their charter collaborative, and they wouldn't allow it. And then, I don't know, maybe Diana, you could maybe talk more about this, because I was not in administration at the time yet. We were just told that it was done. They let us go, they let us get out of that contract we had with them.
Yeah, so the Colorado Springs School Board wanted to separate from the collaborative just due to extreme expenses that the management or charter management charged them. And they tried, like you said, in 2018, and the board would not approve that. So then they, continued in the following year. It was approved for them to separate from the collaborative. They finally just started the relationships and stuff. They thought it would be best if they did. And since we've separated, there's been a big positive, huge difference with what we've been able to do in our resources and everything to that effect.
Can you, I'm not sure if you understand what the collaborative is, but you want to share, or I can share that. Because the collaborative is a little different. There were several charter schools with their independent boards, and they would send a representative in, and then they would decide what the collaborative would do. And so that's what they say when they say collaborative.
It's called a Charter Management Organization. A CMO is how they're referred to as, like through districts and stuff. So basically, they had one human resource, the collaborative for all the schools, which was at the time when Colorado Springs School left, there were 6 schools. So they did, they pooled all the resources. So, and the main office was up in North Glen, so Colorado Springs, and this was another issue, Colorado Springs were not getting all the resources that they needed. Some of the special education teachers, to that effect, marketing, human resources, there was just several things that the charter management, and then they charged a hefty fee. I don't remember what they charged. That came directly, that you paid monthly to them directly out of, and then they entered into some in the beginning, as you probably know, that Thomas McLaren School bought that building and too big, and just drained our budget with expenses. And then we were able to swap where Thomas McLaren was actually where we're at now in Pulpit Rock Church. So we were able to kind of swap, and they took over the lease, and we went to Pulpit and created new terms and stuff. So that was very beneficial to the school to do that, to get out of that building that was draining them.
Okay. Anything else from the DAC report? You've looked at the DAC report. They had several questions out there. Anything else from that you talked briefly about the safety plan and access of the school by the church staff out there? Anything else that is in your time using that building that has stood out to you as far as safety? Anything that has been an issue or a problem out there?
No, I'm not quite sure what all the concerns were. I know middle school was one of them, and then the safety. We have, in the meantime, submitted our safety plan to the board, so you should
Okay.
have been able to view it. I think they had some questions about our school accountability committee. We do have one. I do realize that the minutes were not accessible, but we actually have one that meets every month instead of as is legally required every quarter. We're very active.
I can speak to SAC. I actually sat on SAC for 2 years. Our SAC admittedly wasn't as active during COVID. And when COVID went to the wayside a little bit, SAC reformed with essentially a brand new group of people, which is beneficial because they're extremely passionate. They want to meet monthly to learn what the school is doing to be engaged. They are a very engaged group. There is a challenge in it, though, that we don't have the institutional knowledge of how to operate as a SAC. There's a lot of learning as we go. And this will lead to one of the other questions that came up about why we would like to transfer, why we are interested in transferring our charter. There are several reasons, but I'll just touch on one as it relates to SAC. I think that our SAC could benefit from a local mentor, learning a little bit more about what are some things that they could be doing to be more active. There is a deep, deep desire for our SAC to be more engaged and more active. And with such a small school, we're a little bit unsure how to utilize them to the best of their ability. So that is one thing, I think, when we're looking at having a local authorizer, having access to local resources, local mentors, local partners that could help strengthen some of our areas where there's a desire and a need to be more engaged, and we are perhaps falling short and giving them some guidance on how to do that, if that makes any sense. But they do meet monthly, they're very active, they're very engaged, they review their bylaws regularly to make sure that they're checking all the boxes and doing everything that they are supposed to do and required to do. They're very diligent about that.
So when was the last meeting?
Probably last week.
No, we actually canceled last week's meeting. So for this month, the meeting was canceled because the president was out of town. It was the March meeting.
So they meet I believe it's the second Tuesday of every month.
Yes.
Just as I have to say, I really appreciate your governance information on your website with the board meetings, agendas, and minutes posted, but for the SAC, there is no way for anybody to know it exists beyond on paper. So, and in your minutes, it's like, we're gonna have a SAC update from the SAC, and it's like, there's no minutes that suggest that anybody has reported since the fall, and at that point, the statement is that they've met twice in the last year. So I'm glad they're meeting more often, but indeed, to our DAC's concerns, it seems like some additional information could be shared out to your community.
And that can be easily remedied, I think.
It can. I do realize that, you know, it's not as up to date as it needs to be, and this is certainly something we're going to work on. I can say that we do publish the dates and times of our board meetings and the SAC meeting in the newsletter, in the weekly newsletter. And that should be accessible too under news posts. You will see
I
that.
read one of them.
That you can see there is SAC meetings going on and board meetings as well. Yeah.
All right, so I just have to dig a little further. Thank you. You're welcome.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and I know we need to make it easier for the community and the stakeholders to access
I
that.
can comment that I felt the power of the non-existent SAC, though. I mean, when I was, Sela had offered me an opportunity to do a mini town hall, which we did remotely, and there were dozens, if not 50 people on that, hearing our vision at District 11, and then peppering us with questions on if they thought it would be an opportunity. So there's certainly an active group of people seeking at least one form of accountability of what would be a shift in governance model. So and I'm certainly hearing from Beth a commitment to partnering with the resources that we have. We just completed our first really strong district-wide SAC training that we actually broke out by region. And actually absent from that was Dr. Mendelsberg and his region. And so we had the 4 traditional run schools with area superintendents, but we didn't have, Scott was there, but we didn't have charter representation at his tables. We had the alternative schools that he leads. So it's a room for opportunity as well.
Yeah, perfect. I think Superintendent Gall took the words out of my mouth. There is an opportunity there. Your ask, we hear you. We've tried to keep an active DAC, which is the District Accountability Committee, and then also reach out and ensure that every one of our schools, 50+ schools, has a working school accountability committee and provide a training opportunity. The members on the school accountability change from year to year. So providing them with up-to-date training sessions, that is something that happens every year. We have four opportunities, one in every quarter. So we will certainly put you in touch if you are going to be part of district level portfolio schools.
I think that would be very helpful to us. I think it's an area that we could improve, and I think that you all could help us with that.
Okay. So since you were going on that train of thought, anything else that you would benefit from the partnership with district level?
I mean, we'll be very transparent. You know, the financial benefits are appealing to us. We are very healthy financially. We are doing well. But when we're talking to our community, and Mr. Gall can attest to the town hall that we had, you know, a lot of the questions were surrounding concerns about whether we would be able to maintain our autonomy, whether we were able to control of our curriculum, those things. But the thing that really got our community as a whole excited and engaged was the opportunity for us to have additional resources to buy those school textbooks that are on our wish list that we haven't been able to address, or to look at a better facility if we have a little bit more, you know, if we have more influx of finances. We would love to be able to pay our staff competitively. So those are all things when we're talking to our community and telling them, you know, this partnership there is potential there. They got really excited about that. And then certainly when Mr. Gall was on the call and assured everyone that the culture of the school would not change, and that our curriculum wouldn't change, and that our board would still be responsible for overseeing our policies, they were really excited about learning more about this opportunity. I think that our conversation with our community is not ended. The more we learn about where we move forward, we'll continue to share that with them. But that is the biggest draw for our community as a whole.
Yeah, and chiming in on this too is, apart from, I mean, financially, yes, that is, you know, certainly a draw for us, but also being rooted or being authorized where our community is locally.
That was the other big thing.
The Charter School Institute, they have schools on their portfolio from all over Colorado. And while they have been very supportive with us, I mean, we have no quarrels with our current authorizer at all. I think it is important to be where, you know, where our kids are, where our communities are, where our students come from, and the parents, and making it easier for us to get other resources and supports, like, you know, with the SAC, as we just mentioned, but also other things. You know, if we recently had a tragic event happen among our staff, so maybe having access to grievance counselors or grief counselors, or other mental health resources. While CSI gives us good direction of where to go, they do not have anybody locally down here that we could fall back on in the event of, you know, needing someone. And yeah, the district is here, and you know, in Colorado Springs, in the area, they know the resources locally down here, and that's certainly one of the benefits that we hope to gain from this relationship as well.
When we were speaking as a board and school administration, you know, that is, the financial piece is something that I think our community as a whole gets excited about. But then on the leadership level, we have talked a lot about an authorizer as almost a partner, someone that we can look to for resources or if we have a question. We're not very needy. We don't do that very often. But when we do, it'd be lovely to have someone, some local resources to help guide us through SAC or grievance counseling, or it sounds like you have quite a few trainings that you offer to your schools and to your charter schools, and that would be really beneficial to us. Right now, a lot of those trainings are up in Denver. our CSI is. So admittedly, we don't attend as many, and I know we also have a very active board that is interested in doing more training, board training, and having some local trainings would be really helpful. It would make them more accessible. So I think that there's a lot of opportunities where we could utilize local resources, and our leadership gets very excited about that part.
So I'm looking at your SWOT analysis and your strategic plan, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, which I appreciated having that to review. It really lays out where you're at as an organization. Can you clarify why on your website it says that you were performance with distinction in 2022, which congratulations, that's great news, but then you list that as school test scores as a threat, and then opportunity also is test results. So there seems
Yes.
like kind of a
Yeah,
that's
so
opposite.
that analysis was done a few years ago when we were on improvement status.
Oh, okay.
So it's not up to date, and I'm assuming we will be doing a new one in a couple of weeks in
Yep.
May when we have the strategic planning session
It
with the board.
says
Well, it's good evidence in you address that now that you're a school with distinction.
Addressed, checked off, yeah.
it stated March 2022 at the top, so.
I think they had just revisited it. I don't think that it was
They
actually
actually
created.
updated it, okay. So how long have you been out of that the danger zone, I guess, as far as academically?
So officially, we are out of that danger zone for a while now, but because there was no state accountability or school performance framework, since this is from 2019.
Okay.
And if you look at, it's a public record on CDE's website as well, they actually have a split up between our elementary school performance and the middle school. And the elementary school has always been performance.
Okay.
But the overall rating, because that was that 1 year that our middle school dragged our scores down.
Okay. So generally speaking, in the years that you've been open, you performed well academically.
Yes.
Any years.
Yeah.
Okay. One last question. You also list a threat, and maybe this isn't true anymore, as keeping students beyond second grade. Can you just speak to that a little bit, like why that is the case, what you see is the root cause, and how you might address it?
Yeah, I think this has been addressed as well. So we collect more data now on why people leave or withdraw. We have a really strong foundation, so our enrollment it takes a pyramid shape. We have the biggest enrollment in kindergarten, and in first grade and second grade, and it kind of tampers down. There's various reasons. So we also have a lot of fluctuation throughout the school year as well, and we track all of that, and it's mostly due to moves. So during COVID and even after, we saw a lot of people leaving the state or moving probably out of economic reasons. But other things that come to mind too is that earlier on people seem to be more willing to make the drive or make extra trips, but if they have kids in other schools, at some point we do see, and that's usually second, third grade, we're saying, okay, this is just getting too much for us. We want all our kids kind of in the same area. So if they have middle schoolers, for example, that go to their home school or their neighborhood school, they are more likely to, at some point, just say, okay, logistically, we can't do it anymore.
And a language school is so different than a traditional school, because a traditional school, if you lose kids due to moves or military PCSs, you'll get the same amount back as new families PCS and come in. But at a language school, it's a little bit more difficult or intimidating to join at a fourth grade level. We can make it work.
That was gonna be my next question. How do you have a process to bring students in at third, fourth, fifth grade if they want to, and are they successful?
Yes, they are. As we always bring, over the years, we've always brought in kids in higher grade levels. I would say in third, fourth, and fifth, it's still possible, and some languages are easier than others. So I would always recommend, Spanish, certainly easier than coming into a fourth grade Chinese class without any prior Chinese knowledge.
Yeah.
We strongly discourage parents from trying to do that unless they already have some kind of language background. So for Spanish, it's and German is kind of in between, I would say. It's a it's a complex language. But yes, the kids are, they are successful. Our immersion teachers are really good at differentiation and making groups based on language proficiency. So they, within the grade level, really have it down to reaching the kids where they are with their language and scaffolding enough for the newcomers to be able to keep up. Yeah, and that was one of the things from middle school as well. I think in middle school it became really hard. We had a few kids that came into 6th and 7th grade with no prior language knowledge, and it made it really hard.
Do you, what's the percentage of your student population that is military? Do you track that?
I don't have a concrete number for that. I know this year it is higher again. I want to say we have probably like 25.
So just under 10%. Diana, are you all submitting the, what's the name of the federal form for anybody?
Impact aid.
Impact aid. Do you all collect them?
You know, CSI is collecting that still.
They did not this year though.
Oh, they didn't
stopped
collect
because
it?
they have not received
Oh,
any
right, because they didn't have enough people signing up or filling out the app or enrolling in that, so they stopped it for a few years. I believe they're gonna wait and then revisit it and see where they're at.
It's been a big initiative of David's team's work through the enrollment shop and how we get that feedback. Obviously, us being, you know, surrounded by military bases and actually backing up to one.
Yeah.
We have a huge population set that we don't think we're accurately getting federal impact aid for, so.
Yeah, and we do have an MFLEC as well, a military family life consultant, I think is what it stands for, paid for by the Department of Defense that comes to the school once a week and meets with the military kids.
Couple of questions, and then I saw Director Daniels raise her hand too. What percentage of your students come from District 11 boundaries and outside? Maybe that's in your report somewhere.
I didn't see it.
Okay, what percentage of your students come from District 11 boundaries and outside?
I want to say that about 50% of our students are from District 11. I think we have about 150 that are.
Yeah, we just did an analysis of that, and I think it was roughly around 50%.
And then transportation, what type of transportation do you guys provide?
We have buses, and this is one of the areas that we would ask for clarification, you know, in this process as well. So we run 3 routes right now. One is a north route, a central route, and a south. So we do bus students from other districts at this point, especially down south, D2 and D8, D3, some from D20 and D49.
And I think we figured out it was about 50 students
from the south route.
From the south route, and about 11 from the north route, and then a handful from the southern, or from the central.
Okay, are all these students from outer boundaries, or do you transport within District 11 boundaries through transportation?
A combination.
Combination. Some of them are out. Some of our stops are where we pick up are outside of the district boundaries right now.
You mentioned you needed some clarification. What clarification do you need from us or from the district in that regard?
Because as a charter, you know, as authorized through the Charter School Institute, we are able to transport across district boundaries because they don't apply to us. And we're still unclear on the fact of whether or not we will be able to continue doing this if we are authorized through the district, because we would still be a charter school. So we've been working with Scott on this as well as our attorney to get clarification, because that would impact us, our culture and our diversity in a possibly negative way if we were not able to, you know, pick up kids or provide transportation to those kids, especially from the south area of town.
Okay, Director Daniels.
Thank you. That was one of my questions when you mentioned parents are feeling the weight of traveling with their various age groups. So thank you for that. The next question is, somewhere in the documentation, I saw that you were having challenges with hiring teachers with that diversity of language, right? Because the field is shrinking. So having those teachers with it as their first language, but also the ability to teach all of the surrounding supports, whether it's ELL, GT, SPED, on top of having to do PE, art, all of those different things. I can't remember which document it was, but I noticed that you said it was a challenge finding certified teachers that could come in and actually do that. So I'm curious about your turnover rate with your educators. How hard is it to find those teachers? And I know that the DAC did a beautiful job with just asking questions for each section. I'm not sure if you guys got a chance to see all of that in regards to your USIP and how do you manage the difficult behaviors? Would you need the partnership for managing all of those peripherals as well? Behavior, ELL, GT, just curious. I know that's a lot of questions in one.
No, absolutely, I'm more than happy to answer. I think that because the school hasn't been around since 2013, so all of these peripheral things you are talking about, we are pretty firm. When we have an ELL teacher, we had a harder time finding a special education teacher this year. So I was actually the special education teacher at the school before I came into admin. So this year we are actually contracting through an outside agency for one, which is not ideal, but we need to have a SPED teacher, and we have a really well-functioning SPED team and have had it over the years. Same goes for gifted and talented. We have a GT teacher as well. So and a reading interventionist. So we hire all of these positions. And then in terms of staffing, so a regular elementary school, we would have one teacher that teaches all the subjects throughout the day. So they would stay with their class all day long. We have double the burden because we need 2 teachers per grade level. So we have the language immersion teacher that teaches the language and the literacy in the language, but also math. And then we have an English teacher for that same group of kids that teaches ELA, social studies, and science. So we have double the financial burden, I would say, in terms of staffing. That's just what we need to do, because so far I have not found a teacher that can teach both Mandarin Chinese, but also English and reading and writing. So that's one of the challenges that we face. So far I would say we have been successful in mastering that. We have a really low turnover rate. We lost a couple of teachers last year, but it was 2 of them we lost because their husbands were active duty, so they PCS'd. One of our teachers we lost to D11, actually, to your guys' language immersion program at Will Rogers. But I think that was about it, yeah.
So when, is it okay to ask another? So when it comes to the search for the applicants and where you find them, that's truly interested in, I would say, bringing in the language and working in the pool of educators we all have to pull from. In the paperwork, I noticed you said it was going to be a bit of a challenge as you see it progress in the city and just where everything is going. So I just wanted to hear a little bit more from you guys on what you're noticing.
So what we are noticing when we first started in 2013, and I think Dr. Lohmer mentioned that last time that we were a little ahead of our time. It was not as sought after as GBA maybe thought back then. But now it's catching up. So we have a lot more interest in our programs, but unfortunately, or I don't want to say unfortunately, but other school districts also caught on to the importance of teaching languages. I know District 20 has Chinese immersion programs, so we have lost in the past some of our Chinese language teachers to District 20. Obvious reasons being that as a more affluent district, they are able to pay better than we can. I mean, we are one small charter school. We work on even though financially we are really stable right now and on an upward trajectory, we cannot offer what a district can offer. And for some of our teachers, I know one language teacher told me my son is in college now, so I need to, I just need to make more money, which is absolutely understandable. But I think it really speaks for our culture and for what we stand for as a school that we do have a low turnover rate. Most of our teachers have been with us for many years, and they like the work climate, they like the students that they work with. I think we really have a unique environment going, a positive one that
We
that
just
speaks for us.
recently sent a survey out to all the staff within the month to take a pulse on how they're feeling. And the overwhelming, and I cannot stress overwhelming feedback, is they choose to stay because of the culture. They choose to stay because of the diversity, and they choose to stay because of our leadership team, primarily this leadership team. So I think that I'm hearing, I mean, I did not see a single negative review or a piece of feedback from them or any inclination that anyone wants to leave. And I've been there for 3 years now, and I've seen extremely minimal turnover. It's one of the reasons that we like to stay there as a parent. So I think for all those reasons, the challenges that they're coming are also the reasons that when we do get them, they stay. They do decide to stay with us. I also, and I haven't read back through all of the board minutes that we sent you in great detail, but I believe some of the documentation you might be reading was surrounding a discussion about possibly adding a new language that has occurred over the last year. And one of the big discussion pieces around that, I think we were looking at Arabic and Russian at the time, and a lot of the discussion around that was the availability and how could we recruit those languages as tougher languages. So I'm wondering if that's where you were reading that documentation as part of that discussion.
There are so many documents.
I know.
We know.
So I was trying to draw on where you found that, and I was like, I haven't read them all recently, but I know there was a lot of discussion around that particular subject when we were discussing whether to add a new language, and that was one of the ultimate reasons why we opted not to add a language, was staffing concerns.
Yeah, and then thinking about middle school and staffing that, and then the pyramid, it goes. So I was just like, whoa. And I know overall it's a tough economy right now with finding educators and even finding some young people who want to come into the industry. Again, just even when we talk about the students and the teachers, we know that there are some students that are going to fall below the radar. So what are the parameters for those students who do not just shoot straight to the top, but as you say, you don't have a lot of turnover. They obviously want to stay. So how do you manage getting them onboarded where they need to be to stay and see the value and just go on through? You know, there's so many questions that DAC posed, and I wasn't really sure if you guys had a chance to really just see those or not, but they were pretty good questions, and I just thought, yeah, well.
You have the DAC report, don't you?
Yes, we do.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So anything else that you want to address, what Director Daniels talked about?
Yeah, so your question is regarding students, how do we, what do we do in order to bring them to where they need to be
Yes.
in the language and also in content?
Yes.
Like I said, our language teachers are really skilled in differentiation. So all of this can be done, to bring them to where they need to be language-wise. And we also have to realize that even within a one grade level, not everybody will be at the same language proficiency level, especially when you started out later. It just takes a while, and considering that language, we have the expressive part of the language that develops later versus the receptive one, which is reading and listening, and then the speaking and writing. So we have to just accept that some of these things do come later, but we meet every student where they are with their language and progress them and grow them. In terms of other subject areas like math and ELA and all of these other things, we do have all of the wraparound services. We have a great MTSS system in place, so we do use MTSS. We have, like I said, we have special education, we have a reading interventionist, an ELL teacher, a gifted and talented teacher that work together as a team, but also with the general education teachers in providing the necessary interventions and strategies that are needed for the kids that may, fall behind.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I noticed that they're half-time, so you guys only have them a couple of days a week, or is it
No.
every day, half a day or something like that?
Our ELL teacher is full-time and so is our reading interventionist.
Okay.
The GT teacher is a part-time position, and our ideally, and that's what we're aiming for again for next year, special education. Our special education teacher would be a full-time position. Right now, as I said, we are contracting through an outside agency for 3 days a week. That's all that was available, unfortunately. And I know other districts also had a hard time finding special education teachers this year, which is a concern. But we already have a plan in place for next year. We are trying to grow one of our own staff members who will be, getting her license under mentorship. So always trying to grow from within as well. But that is a full-time position as well. So the only one that really is only part-time is GT.
And several of our
Some are.
D11 schools have part-time GT teachers.
common.
It's not unique that you
Yeah.
guys have
Yeah. No, yeah, there's,
Okay, Director Bankus or Director Jurgensen, do you guys have any thoughts or feedback or questions? Either one of you can jump in. Okay, there you go, Director Jurgensen.
I don't have any thoughts or feedback. I appreciate all the questions from my fellow directors and look forward to continuing the conversation.
Director Bankus?
I don't have any other questions. We seem to have covered quite a spectrum of concerns on both sides. Sorry, my phone's ringing.
Director Art.
Thank you. So just a follow-up to Director Daniels' comment. Are you fully staffed then at this time with the contracting and things like that? Do you?
yes, with the
Okay.
contracting, yes.
Okay. So I'll have two more questions at least. One, do you have any enrollment concerns? Because certainly, I mean, you've had quite a number leave, and some of that's because of the middle school, but also the numbers just, there is a significant difference, and it's not all middle school. So
No, it is not. That, actually, I have the numbers in front of me, so yes. 2018, I think it was the first year we were in that new location. We had an enrollment of 466, and I think you're referring to. The next year we dropped a little bit, and then 2020 even more. There were different factors coming together. That was the year that we closed the middle school. We lost those 38, plus all of the fifth graders, which was 68 of them. That because they would not move on to our middle school, they just graduated fifth grade and moved on to other schools. It was also the year that COVID hit, so we had quite, and also very late in the summer, quite a few people that withdrew or decided not to send their kids to in-person school at this time. We had quite a few families that decided to go with online academies, even though we did offer both. We offered virtual instruction, but also in-person instruction during that year. So that hit us really hard, but ever since we have been on an upswing again. So 2021 we had a total enrollment of 308 students, and then this year it was 311. So we are on the upswing.
stabilizing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I'd say upswing, wait, it's only like a few
Yeah.
students, but I can appreciate.
Stabilizing. So there's two different trends, and I want to just touch on this really quick. This number includes all the students, our full-time regular program, but also the homeschool enrichment. Our homeschool enrichment numbers have been going down, but mostly because there have been so many different enrichment programs have sprung up in the past, especially in the last year. So there's just more variety now for parents to choose from where they send their homeschooled children to. And but yeah, that's an angle we're certainly working at too.
Do you have a projected enrollment for next year?
I am hoping that we will have 295 full-time, and best case scenario would be 50 homeschool, which would be 310 full-time equivalency.
Kind of roughly around the same number that you have this year.
This year, we were funded this year for 290 students. So next year we're hoping to be funded for, what did I say, 310.
Back to you, Director Art. Let's finish your mind.
Okay, yep, and I do have a couple more. What concerns, we talked about transportation and the effect of busing, that how that might play in. What concerns do you have, additional concerns about entering into a contract with D11, and do you have any non-negotiables?
Non-negotiables, I don't know. Do we have
I mean, I think
non-negotiables?
our community, and I feel like it's not even worth mentioning because it's not gonna happen, but I think our community, the non-negotiable, when we talked to our community, was the loss of autonomy, which as a charter, that's not gonna happen, so
Right.
it's a non-issue. But when we took the pulse for our community, that was the big, we wanna make sure that we protect our culture, that we protect our decision-making over the curriculum, and that we can still manage our own policies. So it's sort of a non-issue. That was, you know, our community said, if we lose any of that, it's a no deal, but that's not really an issue.
Right, okay.
The uncertainties, again, is transportation, where we're not quite clear on, because like I've mentioned before, it really contributes a lot to our diversity and our culture, that we do pull from different districts, and some of these students really rely on transportation. And you know, that's one of our big things, as well as we have a really active family outreach coordinator. We work a lot with at-risk families and students, providing a ton of different wrap-around services for them. So this is something that really we want to keep up. We want to keep our diversity up, because it is what makes us unique and what makes us who we are. So this is really something that we would like to make sure we keep.
Let Director Art finish. Are you
Yeah,
done?
oh, yeah, sorry, you gotta wait your turn, friend. So the enrollment, or the, not enrollment, sorry, looking at my list. The busing, you don't expect to have District 11 busing your students at all. That busing concern was really just if you could go in and out of.
Yeah, no, we
Correct.
have our own,
Area.
we own 3 buses and a 15-passenger van.
Okay,
So yeah, we have staff, we have drivers.
okay,
And those type of direct buyback services would come through contract negotiation if they wanted some level of support from District 11. Then that just adds to our requirement and whether or not we could offer that based upon some of the challenges that we've had.
yeah,
But those types of things come in contract negotiation, of which there had actually been a conversation, you all had a broken down bus for a while, and they had asked if we had excess buses to be able to offer on a rental or a for sale basis. I believe you fixed your bus before we had to get to that space, but.
all right, thank you, I appreciate that. So this is a very particular question, generally about finances. The board didn't, I saw that they were attached as part of the application process, but we haven't, or at least I don't know where I would find the 5-year budget. So Dr. Mendelsberg, I gave a heads up to, I'm like, finances, where are they? So I want to see those and know what the understanding is of the budget. But specifically in the transfer application, it mentions that based on your current enrollment the first year, it would be an additional, this is the additional increase in per pupil funding. Based on your current enrollment, the first year it would be an additional $230,000. Second year would be $469,220. And then going forward, it would be an additional $708,470 per year. So I was trying to wrap my head around those
answer that.
numbers.
So as
Thank you.
part of contract negotiation, there had been some conversations with transfer applications taking a phased-in approach to mill levy.
Mhm.
So I believe the language that's there is reflective of that.
Okay,
That strategy was scrapped in contract negotiation during the previous charter that was brought in James Irwin due to some litigative issues concerning that.
okay,
So those numbers would need to be updated, but all numbers are suspect to the contract negotiation. So all students in District 11 have access to full mill levy as when they become part of District 11.
all right. That essentially was what I was wondering, is because it's like, you get all of the MLO money, I'm assuming, or none of it because you're not part of the D11 system. And I was wondering how in the world that was.
There were conversations with
Working.
CSI in the state on whether or not a transfer application could have a different set of rules to minimize what is seen or felt as a financial impact to a district. And then the conversation has been that it's actually not the district's money, it's the people who pay the mill levies money, whose students get access to that money regardless of governance model.
Okay.
So in an effort to not put the district in a potentially litigious contract, the decision was made under James Irwin and addressed in that contract that they get access to the mill levy as do all students in District 11.
All right, thank you for the clarification. And I also highlighted it, right, the paragraph under that about the building. I appreciate that you want, you know, that a district building would assist you addressing rent, but it just, at the moment, I'm not aware that we have anything at all. And of course, that's something every charter school, as Dr. Melpaka mentioned previously, it's like everybody would like that, because it would be a help, I know. And
so part of the thing that we'll get from our Allaview relationship is our true cost of educating a student. Right now, we think of most of our traditional, I'll talk with a traditional lens on, our cost of educating the student is what I call above the line. What's our staffing, what's our programming, what do we pay for electricity that day? We don't really bake into our cost the sunk cost of the facility because we own it, so we're not renting. But there is a long-term associated cost in any traditional run school. The pressure that charters feel, if not given access to that existing facility, is that they have to then, above the line, close that gap on the facility costs. And so we heard that clearly from, it was Globe that was here last week, that was certainly opining on the cost incurred by their charter school from a previous board's decision to move them from a already owned facility at the Longfellow campus to then them having to procure. They feel that because that's above the line. They write a check for that facility. We write that check as well, we just don't see it. It's baked into our facilities cost, our capital budgets plan, our questions on do we or do we not go for a bond. And so there is a real question on the table in public education as what is the cost in just providing the space. If you don't have space, you end up renting a church because that's how committed you are to your charter in your belief that you can have positive impact for students. Is that a benefit or a deficit? That's for other folks to determine. But there is real cost even for our schools, but we don't talk about it that way. We are not forced. If you can't close your books because you're down 100 kids, you can't close your books and you're out of business. When we have inefficient schools or low utilization, we have economy of scale, and because we own the facility, we as the then leaser or renter of that facility never hold ourselves accountable to that. And so it's an interesting dialogue for us to consider, is there a minimum threshold of which we believe is us being good stewards of the tax dollar? So I have done some consulting work prior to coming to District 11 with some national think tanks on should districts adopt policies that say when a building goes under 70%, it is now on the clock to increase its enrollment or find alternative partners to get the most use of that sunk dollar. That building exists and you're paying for that building, so you just don't realize it because you're not writing that same check. When we balance our budget every year, the facilities costs are usually about the same. But there is conversation that says, is there missed opportunity in allowing low utilization rates to go forward? And could that be ways that districts recoup dollars in other ways? And I don't mean you let 7-Eleven have the bottom floor. You bring in nonprofit collaboratives in the same way that we brought in Friends of Children to a completely empty space at James Swigert. And I love the fact that some of the conversation was, do we just give it to them for free because it's the right thing to do? And in the end, they're just paying the operational cost to be there. It's a huge benefit for that nonprofit because they can't procure that office space. So they want to be a good steward, but if you have space, how you use it, I think is a community and a board conversation that we should have.
And to be clear on that point, I don't think that there's an expectation from our board or from our leadership that if we were authorized under D11 that there would be an opportunity for us to move into a facility if there was one available. That's not the expectation, but I think that it's more that there would be a partnership there And if the opportunity ever arose, that we'd be open to dialogue about it. I think it's just a window being open is what we're interested in, not an expectation.
Just one last follow-up then, is that if we can get the additional financial documents that were referenced shared out to the board and maybe posted when we go to look at this for action. So, thank you.
You got that, Dr. Mittelsberger, what the request was?
I'm sorry.
You got
Yeah, I
what
got
the request was. Director Daniels.
Thank you. I believe we were talking about that. It's under the FMP when we started looking at whether or not the buildings, especially with the age of the buildings, what should we transition into when we were talking about the bond? That conversation was really a heavy one
Yes.
and a very deep one that we did start touching on. So I think first, the town hall. Do we have notes and information from those questions that were posed? Did anyone transcribe it for us to maybe go back and look at and see what was talked about and discussed?
Yeah, there's two things. First of all, we did record it,
Yeah,
so we
yeah.
could certainly share, I think,
That's
the recording
That's great.
if it's still active. So it was, I believe it was a Google Teams meeting, and we did record the entire thing for parents and staff that couldn't attend. We want to make sure everything that we do is always inclusive. So we wanted to, we intentionally made it online so everyone could attend that wanted to attend. And then we recorded it knowing that we had a few parents that were interested and probably some staff. So we can certainly provide that if you'd like.
Yeah, I would love to just kind of hear where everyone was, and especially since you mentioned they were taking away our autonomy, which I don't know anybody who wants that autonomy taken away. And then when we discussed the educators, and I know that I know you guys are trying to home grow, right? So what percentage are certified teachers, and when you're home growing, are you using those different licensure programs that are out there to grow your own? I wasn't really sure if that was an option for you or not, but I know that there are huge efforts in the state. Colorado as a state is really going through. So, and I know they're working hard with helping the interested parties consider it, whether it's troops to teachers or I can't even come up with the other ones, but there's so much. So how is that working for you all?
So I would say that right now all of our English teachers are certified to hold licenses.
Okay.
Our language immersion teachers, some do and some don't.
Gotcha.
We always encourage them to get their license just because it is, it's best practice. And I myself went through the process, so I did start out at the school as a German immersion teacher. I do not have an education background. I have never taught before, or I had never taught before. And then when I started at the school, and then I decided to get my special education license. And going through that program, that licensing program, was eye-opening for me, as it all of a sudden it became so much clearer of why we do certain things, or what the best practices are in different areas. So we always encourage our teachers to do that. It is certainly a little harder for us because they will have to go to outside agencies to do it. So there's BOCES or different universities that offer it. I do believe, I'm not quite sure on it, but I do believe that the district, for example, you guys have your own licensing or induction program as well, which we don't have. So that would possibly be a benefit or a partnership for us.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's how we try to grow them from within. We also have been trying recruiting through UCCS as well. But yeah, it is. We do provide really good training for our language immersion teachers in-house, just because our priority is for them to be native speakers. We believe that you can only learn a language if it's from somebody that learned or has this language as their first language. So that ultimately means that our teachers come from very different backgrounds. Some of them do come from an educational background and others don't. But we still need to make sure that they are, high quality teachers. So they have to be.
You're getting the desired academic outcomes at the end. So as far as your performance goes, which you are performance with distinction. So, which speaks volumes for what is going on. Any more questions from
Yeah, I
the
think it was the strategic plan where I saw the part about finding the additional teachers as you're growing and noticing that the industry is kind of shrinking, especially for dual immersion speakers, things like that. So I just have to find the page, I think.
And I think you are correct. I think this has been brought up because other school districts or schools in the area, we're looking for language immersion teachers as well.
Okay.
To kind of recruit.
I'll go to Director Loma, and if you've got any more questions, let's wrap it up so we have other items on the agenda. Director Loma, you
I
can
got a couple, I'm just commend on you, that you do have a SAC. District, it's not easy to get SAC. Parents, we've had trouble in the district, and having operated several schools, that's a tough, that's a heavy load to get your SAC, so I'm glad to hear that. Now, as I recall, the recruitment for language, especially Mandarin, I know when I was involved with Global Village, they had a direct access to a program in China, and they would bring the teachers in. Do you still use the same channel, or you have
No,
different
that
channels?
was Han Bon, and no, we do not do that. And I mean, we really truly haven't had issues recruiting the staff that we need.
Yeah.
We've been very fortunate.
Okay, so then you talk about language. I've been talking about high-end languages, and one of them is Swahili, but the other one is Farsi. You talk about Arabic, but if you're going to go that way, Farsi is far more critical. It's a critical language. That would be something. Dr. K is Iranian. He don't even know how to speak Farsi. The guy, he missed out. But that is a language you might want to look into, because I know you already have critical language of Mandarin China. That's critical. The other one is Swahili, which is another critical, and then you have Farsi. Those are the three critical languages that, if you can speak the language, you can work anywhere just by speaking the language, being a citizen. They'll start you at 6 figures, because you can get a security clearance and speak the language. It's not, if you're from China, you can never get a security clearance in the United States. Same with the Farsi. So these are languages that are very critical to our future. And these kids, this is what I seen 10 years ago. These kids are going to be in high demand. I mean, I'm not talking high demand because they're American citizens. They got American passport and they can speak critical languages. It's just mind-blowing.
Good luck finding Farsi teachers.
Farsi? Yeah. Well, that's what that's finding the channel.
Yeah.
Right, and so, and then you're talking about certified teachers, and I'm all great for certified, but really a charter, all you have to do is have highly qualified. Mm-hmm. And I kind of lean that way, to have highly qualified, because they're, I don't want to offend teachers, but let's just say like this, I like the use of being able to be highly qualified, where you can get those that are got their bachelor's and master's in English or math, whatever it is, and not having the laborious activity of being certified, which doesn't change anything. It just gives them a piece of paper, looks nice on the wall. The reality is, are those teachers teaching their children? And I'm more of outcome-based, not on those other things. And so, so having highly qualified puts you in a very unique and really free environment to hire the best teachers. So I like that. And then thirdly, but the mill levy, and I think sometimes, and this has always been the fallback on previous boards, and we forget that money doesn't belong to D11, it belongs to the homeowners and the people that pay the taxes. And I'm sure you probably have a few of those in your school that pay taxes and get no benefit whatsoever from that. And so I think out of fairness, because we're all talking about everybody paying their fair share, out of fairness, those people deserve to have the taxes that they paid in for decades and never got a penny. So really, we're way behind the curve, because they've been paying these mill levies for 10 years, some longer, and never received any benefit because they've been in the charter community or in a private school, whatever. So, and I think we need to understand that this is not our money, this is their money. And I'm so glad that we can now put the money back to to who it belongs. And that's speaking to the mill levy. Other than that, I'm good.
Okay, thank you, Director Loma. So we had a good, long discussion about this. Board members, this item is coming back as an action item at the next board meeting. So do you have any lingering concerns or questions that still hasn't been answered? One final round. If not, you can also reach out to them through Superintendent Gall and Dr. Mendelsberg. Reach out to them in the next couple of days to provide that questions to them so they can come prepared one last time before the board gets to formally vote on it as an action item.
Just the question about transportation, because it seems as though it would greatly impact you. It's scary to me that we're this far down the path and that we might be voting next week and then you realize, so I would hope that we can get an answer on that like tomorrow so that then you can go back to your community, and if the answer is no, you can't cross boundaries anymore, do you still want to come? So
But I think that was part of other charter negotiations too. I don't know if it was a problem with James Irvin.
I would say the jury, or whoever the jury is, seems to be out on who interprets that and what that interpretation is. As I understand it, Scott, I'll let you, because you might be closer to it. As a CSI charter, you get to do whatever you want, but as a district authorized charter, some of those rules change. There are charter networks in the area who have come up with very creative solutions. He who shall not be named, Mike Miles, right? He has figured out ways to create hub and spokes across the city of where he can pick families up without then having crossed that boundary. So there are ways to solve these problems.
well, and I imagine since we just went through the approval process with James Irwin, they have a similar situation, so we would have already crossed this bridge and already have an
They're a network and they, I believe, have their own solution around that.
okay,
And this is a single site school.
gotcha.
That also, because it's a network, many of the James Irwin schools are located in communities, which means there is less intra-county draw or inter-district draw. Because they have other schools, so you'll go to a different James Irwin school.
And we were hoping for a quick, easy answer, and unfortunately, there's not a quick, easy answer. There's a lot of gray area. So alongside this application, we are also working with our team to figure out, can we come up with our own solution in case the answer is either no? And we're working really hard on that as quickly as we can. It's happening quickly, so we're trying to work as quickly as we can. But yes, it's a concerning issue for us too, but we are trying to be proactive on it.
I mean, it definitely impacts you and your decision more than us. Other than the fact that your enrollment could be impacted, and then that then trickles over into our decision. But for the most part, our vote wouldn't necessarily change based on the answer. It would definitely impact you all.
So the process for it would be similar to what we did with James Irvin. Next week, the board will vote on if SELA is going to be part of District 11, and then request District 11 or authorize District 11 or charge District 11 to start the contract negotiations, the final contract negotiations. So I'm not sure if this has to all be finalized by next week or before the final contract has to come in front of the board for that final vote. I'm assuming that this turnaround process, if the board authorizes SELA, the final turnaround will be much quicker since we've already gone through it once with Jacob.
I think we did the last one in 6 to 8 weeks. I think we could do this in 4 to 6 weeks, which would have us all wrapped up by
end of May.
The end of May.
Hopefully. Okay. That is providing the board is going to first say yes to you next week. So that's the process that's in place. So if the board has any further questions, reach out through Superintendent Gall and Mr. Mendelsberg over the next couple of days. And yeah, next week we will see you as an action item. And I think we will also have public community comments on it at the top of the meeting. We will schedule that. So if you've got community members that are one way or the other that want to either support or against it, I encourage you ask your community to come and speak to the board and speak to this board. Okay. Okay.
Thank you so much for having us tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. It was good to see you, all of you here. Okay. So the next item on the agenda is Proposition EFF. This is the Food and Nutrition Meals Update. And we've got.
Parth, you need to speak up. You're hard to hear.
Okay, I will do that.
That's your Indian culture. You're kind of get suave on us, right?
I will adapt. Chris Odom is here. So it's going to be Proposition FF, is the Food and the Nutrition Meal Update. I know that this was a proposition that the voters passed last year in the November elections. There is some consequences for it, and so you are going to provide us that update. Over to you, Chris Odom. And
thank you, President Mel Packham. Janine Russell is here tonight to give you an overview of how Proposition FF is going to result in healthy school meals for all and the impact and how to the district and how we're going to move forward. So I'm going to turn it over to Janine and then entertain any questions you have, and then we'll be implementing this beginning in May to start next school year.
beginning in May?
We'll sign the paperwork to implement in May to start next school year.
Next school year.
Okay.
Okay, perfect.
With that, Janine?
Thank you, directors and Superintendent Gall when he has the opportunity to return. So again, this is in regards to the Proposition FF, which, as you stated, sir, was voter approved in November. It's more commonly known as Healthy School Meals for All. According to the CDE officials that I've been having numerous dialogues with, there's no formal action required of school district boards of educations. It's simply a process of school food authorities, of which District 11 Food and Nutrition Services is part of. We simply fill out our annual sponsor application. So we will be doing that shortly after May. And so, again, free meals for all students, school year 23-24. It will be a free breakfast where breakfast is offered at, and then certainly the free lunch. The one requirement of Colorado is that all school sites that are eligible must participate in the federal community provision eligibility program, the community eligibility provision program. CEP, which is the Community Eligibility Provision Program, does not use free and reduced meal applications. Instead, it uses a different percentage number. And this comes from identified student percentage, and this is obtained directly from state certified students through TANF, SNAP, Medicaid, or the federal distribution program on Indian reservations. Schools must have a minimum of 40% identified students that have been directly certified in order to be eligible for this particular program. At this moment, potentially, there are 29 school sites that would be required to take part in the Community Eligibility Provision Program, which in the future I will say CEP. Thank you. Yeah. It's a mouthful, okay? The one thing is that when schools participate in the CEP program, they do not collect free and reduced meal applications. If the school site or the district requires, then there is what's known as a family, there is another process to fill out that poverty information. And so it comes through the Federal Economic Family Survey. So again, the schools that would do CEP would not be collecting free and reduced applications, but the schools, as I said, potentially only 29 of our schools, then the remaining of those schools would still process free and reduced applications. And again, the thing is to understand is these are two completely separate, different programs in terms of ranking poverty for schools. Well, how does that impact food service department? There's two funding streams. So with those schools that would not be doing CEP, I would be still doing the traditional free and reduced application process, which is again a different funding stream for state and federal reimbursement. For those schools that are part of the CEP program, that is a different federal funding program. So I would have to maintain two sets, but that's fine. We can manage that. It's all about feeding students.
Let her finish it.
Okay. So what you need to understand is that the state will reimburse all meals served at the free rate for those schools that are doing free and reduced applications. For those schools that are in the CEP program, it is a federal sliding scale of reimbursement. So in other words, a school that has only 40% or the minimum, they're not going to get the full reimbursement rate. However, Colorado State Legislature has promised they are going to make up the difference in the funding. So the bottom line is all students will receive a free meal. I'm going to receive the free rate. I just will receive it through two different funding streams, if that makes any sense. And then to kind of wrap up for you, there's no free and reduced information that is collected from CEP schools. Again, that is the Federal Family Economic Data Survey. And by USDA rules, school nutrition programs, of which that's me, we're not allowed to fund that processing system. The good news is Colorado is coming up with what's known as a form that will take care of both free and reduced and the Family Economic Data Survey. I can administer it, but I cannot pay for it if it's for a CEP school. So in other words, that would become a district decision as to how that is funded, whether it's through the general fund or whether you're requiring each school to fund that part if they are a CEP school.
I'm sorry, I'm confused. What are we having to fund?
So in other words, I can process and administer free and reduced applications. My department pays for that. That's allowable through USDA. When it comes to a CEP school, there are no free and reduced applications. So that part goes away. If a school or the district decides they want the Family Economic Data Survey, then the district has to pay for that processing. I'm not allowed to use USDA dollars to pay for that. What we can do is administer the program for you, but then I have to charge back that allowable cost, if that makes sense.
What's the cost for that, DM?
At the moment, I don't know. I have been in conversations with our free and reduced registrar, Lori Hiley. She knows how to process applications, whether it's the free and reduced or the Family Economic Data Survey. If there's no issues with an application, she probably can get that down to 2 minutes. But then again, when you're working with thousands of these, then it's charging back. And so at the moment, we don't know what your final cost would be because we don't know for sure the number of schools that would be required to participate in CEP. And there has been some dialogue by the state to say, we may ask you to group schools. So in other words, if I have to group schools to get everybody at 40%, that means more of your schools, pardon me, would be required to be CEP. And then that means it becomes smaller and smaller as to what I can administer and pay for.
Are you done with your
Yes.
thing? Okay, Director Loma, I'll come to you first. Before, can the board get the list of 29 schools? At least I would like to.
Yes.
At some point in time. Okay, thank you.
To funding. So why would I go for the lower federal funding rate of CEP? Why couldn't I just stay at free and reduced?
that will become a Colorado state legislate. I have to, any school that meets that minimum has to participate in the program. Because again, Colorado is paying for the difference.
Well, but is that a promise or is it legislated already?
Legislated already.
Okay,
I don't get a choice, so.
so they have already put away funds to pay the difference?
I can't answer that.
I don't think they have. They promise one thing, legislation is another. So I doubt that you'll ever get a penny, because we're already fighting about school funding now. So you probably won't get there's gonna be a
Well,
gap.
there was supposed to be some amount of money set aside for the top 2% of the people who made over 400.
Correct.
I'm just
Yeah.
recollecting from memory, 400,000 or whatever it is. They get to pay more or less money back or something like that. So that's how the program is being funded. So.
Okay, those are my questions, because I put laugh out loud when he said promise from the state. I go, oh my goodness, okay. And so we're required to file for CEP. There is no choice, we have to.
If a school meets that minimum of 40% identified student percentage, they have to.
So the every school that has a hunch that they're close, they're gonna have to get the Federal Family Economic Data Survey to prove it or disprove it.
It's, yes, so in other words, it will become the responsibility of the school to get families to fill out that federal form.
And there's no funding for that, we just have to do it.
If they need that, the thing is, as it mentioned in the slide up there, which I didn't actually talk about, was Title I. Our director, Tamara French, has been working closely with CDE as to how that affects your Title I schools.
Yeah, how do we find out which one are Title I schools if we don't collect the FRL information?
No.
Right now, in the 29 schools, that is all of your Title I schools.
And we're not allowed to still do the FRL form?
Not
They're
in,
like, you just can't do it.
Yeah.
It's not, we can do both.
Yeah. Of the state, yeah.
so it certainly is to our advantage to be able to advertise and inform families to get them to fill out. But there's other ways that Tamara French is researching as to how she will do the Title I funding.
I think she's doing it through census data, which is an allowed method.
And so going back to the piece about the state backfilling the funding, is that being talked about still in the legislature?
That was last year. When they approved Proposition FF, that they approved that it was funded. So we don't have any reason to believe otherwise.
The funding is already there, the funding stream.
So is it part of, it's already baked into like our per pupil School Finance Act money that we're gonna be getting?
No, it'll come through in a separate reimbursement process through Food Nutrition Services.
But, so I guess my question is, like Ms. Horonic, she's building our budget. Does she already have the information she needs to know that this is how much money we're getting from that?
The way it is set up, so I have not received the reimbursement rates for school year 23-24, so I'm making my budget assumptions off of current reimbursement rates from both the state and the federal government. So I am being told that all of the meals will receive the free rate, whether it's CEP or free and reduced. I'm going to get $4.11 for every lunch. That's what I'm being told by CDE.
Some of it is going to come directly from the state, other is going to be partial from federal and partial from state, but you're still getting the $4.11.
Yes.
Just headache trying to figure out where all the funding streams are coming from and everything like that.
It is a definite funding. I mean, I can certainly tell Ms. Horonic that I know I'm going to have this many meals. It's going to come in at $4.11 for a lunch. What I can't do is I will have to go back individually per school, per CEP school, to figure out the funding stream.
Okay,
but we'll make it work.
But when it's all said and done, any student that wants a free meal during lunch gets a free meal during lunch. Is that, or breakfast in schools that have breakfast available?
As long as I am their school food authority. So what does that mean?
Yeah.
I'm not East Lakes High School School Food Authority.
Okay.
I am not Community Preps, so I do not know. So that's why I can't say every single D11 student.
But just every of our traditional D11 schools or
Yes.
whatever it is would have that thing. So it's kind of similar to what we had during COVID times or whatever it is.
Correct.
And then I am assuming we do need that federal economic data survey to be done for the CEP schools.
It would be highly recommended because currently a lot of your school activity fees are tied to free and reduced applications, of which now will go away for 29 schools. So again, that's a process.
Yeah, and also title, how to figure out which is a title school and everything like that. And there is a cost associated with that, and that's what the board has to figure out, or the district has to figure out and bring a recommendation to the board.
Correct.
Whether it has to come out of the general fund or schools individually or whatever. Okay, when you find that out, we can circle back and let us know about it.
Certainly.
Director Bankus, I see your hand up.
Director Bankus?
She can't hear you.
Director Bankus? Okay, I'll go with Director Jurgensen.
Director Jurgensen.
Thank you. Can you hear me? I plugged in my headphones.
Yes.
Okay, great. I can't really read the room, but I'm pretty frustrated after hearing Ms. Russell's discussion. You know, the fact that we've got to now figure out how to chase our own tail on this to still meet the demands that we need to meet for free and reduced lunch ratios and all that. It's just undue burden and stress on our departments that we don't get compensated for, which I'm pretty sure this board's legislative pamphlet that we, approve every year says we are opposed to, unfunded mandates. And this appears to be one in a backhanded type of way. And it's very frustrating as I'm sitting here listening to it.
What is the increased workload on you? I mean, does this
Require additional support for you in terms of personnel, or you've got it covered with what you have right now?
It will require some additional support for the office staff because again, it's the financial aspect and two different funding streams. So that will require extra paperwork and man hours.
What would you guess as far as hours per week, Ms. Russell?
I hesitate to give you a final figure, sir, because I don't know how many schools positively will be required to be in CEP.
Okay.
This bill had undue consequences to it that now we are trying to figure out how to problem solve on behalf of the legislative, discussions and promises through this bill.
Yes, we're one of the rare school districts that has both situations. A lot of the school districts in Colorado Springs don't have CEP schools, so they don't have to worry about those different funding streams. There are some of us who are kind of in the middle. We'll have both. There are some school districts in Colorado that are almost all CEP. So again, they don't have to encounter those extra problems. But once we get going, we'll figure out how to do it. I have a can-do team for food services, so we're in the business of serving kids meals.
We are so thankful to have you, and thank you for your can-do attitude and taking care of that for us.
Director Jurgensen. Director Bankus.
Yes, so my understanding was that this was going to provide a free lunch for all students, but what I'm listening to says that we have two categories that will receive free lunches and breakfasts. Don't we have breakfasts for all students, regardless whether or not they fall under free and reduced lunch or this new category?
Director Banks, not all of School District 11 schools actually serve breakfast. So the requirement is if they are a CEP school, they will have to provide both programs, of which I think I only have one school that doesn't currently provide breakfast within those 29 schools. And so then, yes, all students will still, it doesn't matter whether they're CEP or a regular free and reduced school, if they have breakfast at their location, they will receive a free breakfast. And all will receive a free lunch. It doesn't matter which funding stream we receive the reimbursement for.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I can follow up on that. How many schools total offer breakfast then within the district?
I'm sorry, I don't have those exact figures in front of me. I would just say the majority, I would say, no, I don't want to tell you.
Okay.
I think it's somewhere
I'll be able
between
to.
40 and 50%.
Yes,
It seems to run pretty consistent with our free and reduced lunch ratio, but we'll get the information by school and provide it to the board.
I would rather give you an accurate answer than a guess.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Is there anything else you wanted to add for our better understanding?
I think we're all learning together here. I'm just happy that we are able to provide free breakfast and free lunches for schools and students. I will tell you that last year when we did have universal free meals, because I've just been working on the budget, so I know, we had over 15,000 lunches served a day. Currently, we are down to 11,000 a day. So there is a big difference. Breakfast was 6,339 a day last year, and now I'm down to 4,257 meals. So there is a big difference when money is involved, and so it would be great to go back to last year to serve more free meals.
Thank you.
Will there be any changes to like nutrition requirements or anything like that?
Its nutrition requirements are not tied to this program. However, there are new changes that are upcoming within the next year. We have to reduce sodium levels.
Good.
So,
I mean, this is a conversation for another time.
Yes.
It's something that I'm passionate about. I got my degree in
Yes.
food science and nutrition, and we gotta choose our battles. We're trying to put out the fire of our academic outcomes right now, and so maybe at some point in my term, we can look at our offerings. And I've toured schools and seen like nachos and tater tots on a plate, and I'm like, how is that?
well, I will tell you that
I
our
love nachos and tater tots. Don't get me wrong.
Our dietitian, Jamie Humphrey, works very hard to get them down. She is also very passionate about what goes into a meal. And so everything we meet, and manufacturers have gotten the word. So the tater tots, they don't have a ton load of sodium anymore like they used to. So again, I'd love to have that conversation with you. I'm going to invite you to Doherty when we get our grow tower up and running, of which will actually, through a hydroponic system, be growing 128 plants.
Do you partner with Odyssey Early College's facility?
We've got those partnership conversations going, and so I'm so excited to be able to work with them. But this is, if you want to look it up, it's Fork Farm, and it's a grow tower, and you can harvest every 28 days. It only requires 15 minutes worth of labor.
Very cool.
And you're going to have this at Doherty?
Doherty, yes, I just received it into our warehouse. We're putting it together. We'll start with the seeds, and then I don't think we're going to be able to harvest by May 24th or so, but we'll be able to harvest for summer food service. And I will definitely invite all of you when the plants become bigger.
Send us an invite.
Yes, we'll take
Send us
pictures.
an invite when
I certainly
it's
will.
ready.
I mean, and it's, to me, it's about balance. Like, I mean, I will fix nachos for my family for dinner sometimes, but then we have salad with it or fruit with it. Like tonight, our meal today is excellent. There's vegetables and fruit paired with the bean dip and the spinach dip, you know? So that's where it's like, we gotta ensure we're providing that balance to the kids, whether they choose to take the apple or not. But, you know, if we're offering tater tots and nachos at the same time, I would pick that. But it's also sending a message of, you know, that this is adequate nutrition when it isn't. But it's a conversation for another time.
A conversation, but I will let you know that all of our schools have a salad bar, and when they come to the cashier, they must have fruits and vegetables or combinations or one or the other on their plates. So yes, we're making them, and we're actually bringing in at the beginning of the year, I provided you with peaches and pears and things like that. A lot of local farmers that we are getting product from.
And this program, when implemented, like in a school like Doherty, I go to Doherty quite often. During lunchtime, there is a mass exodus of students all walking to that McDonald's or whatever it is. The success of what we do as a school district and the food nutrition services is all these students are now lining up for the cafeteria food and saying like, this is better than what we get at McDonald's out there. So I don't know if we will ever get to that stage. But.
Well, it is all about perception, and I will let you know that I have worked with teenagers, including Jason, who was one of my student helpers at Doherty. Teenagers will not stand in line, will they, Jason? If there's a huge long line, they use their feet and they go out the door if it's an open campus. And so my thing is to try and provide as many stations as I can to reduce the line. And it's a balance of trying to find out what the students want to eat, because we can do really, really healthy, but if they won't eat it, it's everybody's waste. So again, it's a balancing act.
So what is the ask of the board at this point? Is there any ask?
No.
Okay.
It's information.
Okay.
Well, thank you to your team for, I mean, it's kind of the behind the scenes work of the school district. It's not our number one reason why we're here, but it definitely, you know, if kids are hungry, they're not gonna be able to learn very well. So thank you for.
And this has to be communicated to our parents and stuff like that, starting in August, maybe that communication starts in May before the end of the school year, and then leading up when they come back in August. Just letting our parents know that there is this opportunity for our students, and sometimes students forget their lunch at home, and so they don't need to go hungry if they don't have money in their pockets or anything.
Absolutely, and what we can do is also send out information to leadership levels and announce at the level meetings and work with Dr. Colopy's enrollment center to make sure the word gets out.
Okay, any further questions on the subject? Thank you so much. Thank you for that update.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, and keep us informed, and let us, the only thing I asked was for the list of 29 schools, if that's okay to
Yes.
send to the board.
I will
And
check
then,
right now. I may have that list with me.
Yeah, whenever. And then the Doherty invite, whenever it is, send us.
I'm
And
excited.
then if you need to come back with what the cost is for that federal survey or whatever, the economic data survey. With that, moving on, the next item on the item is the 5 Essentials survey. And this is data that's been, I think the parent part of it happened in October, and then the rest of it, the school and the staff part of it happened in February and March. And that information is complete, and the board got to take a look at some of the summary and also the data dive. I'll hand it over to Superintendent Gall and then Dr. Kane.
We are super excited to share this data today. David and his team, as well as all of the school leaders, and by extension their teams, parents and staff members, have really shown a strong will to communicate how they feel about their environment. Again, data is what data does, as Forrest Gump would once say. So we can interpret the data however we want to, We try to look at it from a trend perspective and then identify anomalies and see what are the things that we're learning from it. David's going to drive most of the show here. The things that I have asked David and the team to really dig into is when we see inconsistencies, why? And so I don't want to say to you, oh, that school's red because it's a new principal. And then 2 minutes later say, look at that new principal who's green. So we understand that sometimes the data doesn't always tell the same exact story. So we're developing a kind of a, I wouldn't quite call it a crisis response team, but a investigative team where does somebody from Ed Insights, somebody from schools, and somebody from the CAO office be able to then go in and see what's really happening here. As an example, we all see tremendous growth in scores from student achievement at Buena Vista, our Montessori school. But you will see 5E's data here that isn't consistent to say, oh, that's a school that's killing it. And so we need to understand that. So we have the basic information now, but as part of our one plan reviews and our commitment to every school having a continuous improvement cycle, Angie deserves to understand why is that. Some people will opine and say, well, Montessori just generally doesn't like to be asked questions. Well, I just can't take that, because maybe the feedback is that the school is doing really well. Maybe the school could be doing even better if we paid attention to that orange indicator. So what I love about things like 5 Essentials is some people will say it's a lagging indicator, and some people will say it's a leading indicator. And the answer is yes. It really is just how you wrap it around the entirety of the school. The other thing as we get to the end here, and I'll just showcase it right now, we have a parent engagement problem. We have been inventive, creative. We have principals running outside to kiss and ride with, hey, fill it out here, let's do this. I'm interested when we get to that slide for some robust discussion by the board of what are the ways that we can better engage. You know, my basic deliverables are on achievement, on enrollment, and engagement. We are doing what we feel are great efforts to get to that engagement, but we're certainly coming to the board as representatives of the constituents of the community. What are the other things that we can be doing? And I don't know what you all will think about that when you get there. I'll pitch it off to David. Thank you.
I'm going to stand. Been sitting for a little bit, and it's fun to engage with this stuff a little bit more. So overall, the agenda, we're going to look at what 5E is. I think we're just going to take a quick overview just to give a bit of a review. You have heard 5E a lot after 17 or so school improvement presentations, and every one of them anchored into 5E. That's really indicative of how important this is for us and foundational. But it's also helpful to see look under the hood of this metric a little bit more. So we're going to go through that relatively quickly, but then really look at tying the 5E to our school improvement strategy. So when we talk about major improvement strategy 1 or best first instruction, are these all just isolated concepts, or are they being pulled together? And I hope that you take away from tonight that they are being pulled together in a coherent whole, so that no data point is standing in isolation and no data point is going unused or unacted upon. Then you have a lot of information on the various trends within the executive summary that you got, both versions. So one is by area, and then the other is broadly across the district, but it has trend data in there, and we'll take a look at that. And then just compare it to a little bit of benchmark data and take a look at how does that compare and so on. So as you know, the 5 Essentials framework, 5 ways of looking at how a student is experiencing their school and how a teacher is experiencing their profession. So I like to think about it as a student leaving an involved family, jumping out of the car into a supportive environment that's led by effective leaders, that's driving collaborative instruction, collaborative teaching, ultimately for the sake of ambitious instruction. So it's a nice story and a nice picture. So you have how each one of these essentials is defined. Underneath each essential is a core measure. And so for example, under ambitious instruction, we have English, we have math, academic press, quality of students' discussions. So ambitious instruction is a little bit of a mixture of both student response and teacher response. But we tried to label what the perspective of each one of those are so that you can get a feel for who's answering those questions. That is a real powerful piece of this tool, is that we're getting direct data from student feedback as well in a way that's kind of usable and then applicable within the one plan. The biggest thing that gets kind of confusing is I have an essential, I have a measure, what's the actual question, right? So we have the essential, that's what we're looking at right here. Underneath that is all those measures that we just looked at on the previous slide, and then for each measure it has individual items and questions. And so these would be just indicative of a few questions that are on the survey. What we don't want to do though is hone in on one particular question and derive strategy based on that question. What we want to do is say, okay, these questions are indicative of these measures that are further indicative of an environment that really drives ambitious instruction. We want to drive and change ambitious instruction by looking at these particular measures, okay? So the questions themselves are simply indicative or examples of how this might work in the school. This is one of the most exciting things from a research perspective on this is one of the only that I know of, and I've been looking around now for a while, one of the only or most rigorous metrics tied to academic outcomes. So taking climate and culture and tying it directly and statistically to academic outcomes in both science, wishful thinking, old science guy, math and English, science as well, but math and English. So what their research basis over 30 years of research shows, 10 times, so 10x and less than 10%. So a school that's strong in 3 or more measures has 10 times greater likelihood of seeing significant change, improvement in math and or English. A school that is weak, or we call it poorly organized, or not yet organized, but we say that they're weak in one area, decreases their chance of seeing significant and sustained academic growth to less than 10%. That is a pretty significant number. And actually that number is 8% in reality. They rounded up a little bit. So there is a strong link within the data, within the University of Chicago data that establishes this. Sorry, wrong direction. So what we're looking at here is the social base of education in a building, climate and culture. When we look at the technical core, we're looking at things like Wonders, we're looking at things like Eureka, we're looking at all those pieces that are really driving and making instructional decisions. Very important, absolutely, absolutely vital. But if we have a weak social base underneath on the bottom of this iceberg, we're decreasing our chances of seeing sustained and significant growth in any of those measures. So this is why it's so important, and this is why you keep hearing that we anchor into it, because we want to maximize the likelihood of our technical core producing the results that we want it to, because we have a strong and healthy social base. Okay, so when we look at the actual data, I don't want to go through the executive summaries line by line for sake of time, but I do want to really point out and highlight a few different trends that I think were captured in the summaries. I want you to leave tonight understanding and again just leaving with the clear notion that what we invest in and what we focus on changes for the positive. So this year I would say that under the leadership of curriculum instruction and Tamara's leadership and the vision that Mike has around best first instruction being implemented at the area superintendent level, we have seen direct outcomes from that in the sense that when you saw our greatest improvements, it was in areas that were around teacher collaboration, reflective practice, teacher-teacher trust. That is a normal progression as we really hyper-focus and laser in on a new way of thinking about instruction and talking about instruction that's going to build trust within the teacher ranks. What you also saw were weaknesses within student-teacher trust and some of the safety factors that we have in buildings. So we have a lot of work to do to translate the trust that's being generated at the teacher-to-teacher level and teacher-to-leader level and have that start to transcend across the entire system, the entire building, so that now we can see that students are trusting those instructional decisions as well. And those are core pieces of BFI. We'll jump into that in more detail. So some of the others, pretty significant improvement at the middle school level. This was a great encouragement to me because we do struggle at the middle school level. And you could see that we still struggle in that safety, in the academic press between students, so a perception of a student and how seriously their peers take this educational process. We're still weak in those areas. But we saw amazing growth, probably the biggest growth that I've ever seen with 5E with some of our middle schools, in particular Holmes. If you saw in the executive summary, jumping 3 levels from poorly organized, not yet organized, to organized. Some of the things that they implemented around their climate and culture are paying off. And that leadership is really something to really drill into. And we're actually bringing middle school principals into a process using the design lab, money from the fund balance, using the design lab for middle school principals to start to look at ways of doing middle school differently. And we have now some guiding principles that we can really pull from. Really exciting. Russell saw a growth of 2 levels, so our middle schools are seeing some results. We moved more students into organized and well-organized schools. And again, BFI is really, I think I can, as a researcher, you're always careful to not correlation causation, but I think BFI, I think we can make a strong case that the focus and the laser focus of BFI is having payoffs in our climate and culture. So those are the key things I want to take away from the executive summaries, and I'll open it up to questions in a moment. But again, a lot of our key takeaways across the district, strong middle school performance. We had I forgot to mention that Penrose, also significant improvement across 3 levels. Serious, really focused work that Katie is doing around climate and culture. She has teacher leader teams in place and embedded, talking regularly about what can we do to improve some of these core essentials. Laser focus on how important this is for her team, and she's empowering her staff to do that work. I want to really call that out as really strong work. Parent influence on decision-making grew across elementary schools and ranked strong. This is one that I want to talk to a little bit more later. Academic engagement was strong across elementary and high, but a significant takeaway is that it dropped significantly at middle school. Hence, the design lab work that was where the first session really centered around. Taking some qualitative feedback from middle school students around the district and understanding that they don't feel like they have much say at all in their educational progress or educational trajectory, and they would like more. So what does that mean for us in this case? Those conversations are ongoing. And then student and teacher feelings of safety across all campuses is a concern that we'll look at. So most important is, again, not to let anything stand in isolation. We're not just giving surveys for the sake of giving surveys. We're giving surveys for the sake of action tied to strategy. And so when we look at the core concepts of BFI over on the right, we can see that 5E results are responding positively. So you reviewed these already, so I won't read them to you. But you can see that the purposeful planning and the creating relevancy pieces, pillars of BFI, are really tied to several of these measures that we look at, particularly growth and academic engagement, and then quality professional development almost across the board. So another focus that our teachers are feeling like, okay, I'm getting the message that I'm getting is coherent and strategic and consistent. That's going to give me trust with my colleagues and, more importantly, trust with my leaders, and that starts to transcend lots of different veins and avenues of work. On the flip side, though, where do we need to respond to 5E data strategically? What pivots and what different strategies do we need to apply? So they really guide our responses to weak areas that are holding back our academic improvement. Course clarity came out as probably one of the biggest ones besides safety. We are not doing a great job in conveying to our students clear why they are learning what they're learning. I think we are growing significantly in creating learning goals. That's a core pillar of BFI. That's a core piece of the professional development that we're doing. That doesn't seem to be translating into students' minds of why am I here? Why am I doing this work? And do I have any voice in this work? That's an area that we need to grow into. And we're on that process, but we're not closing the gap there. We're not closing that loop very well. When we look at continued low performance in student responsibility, that is directly tied to course clarity. If I understand the why, then I'm going to take greater and greater responsibility for my own learning. The biggest one is student safety. And we've already made large large investments in that, which you guys have already engaged with in our district security audit, and implementing key findings from that audit immediately. I mean, those things are already being taken place. Now, I would say that we have sometimes a marketing and communication problem. We do things and we don't talk about them in ways that really make sense to people. It's not for lack of effort, right? But make these changes that we're implementing clear to our families and to our staff and to the various people that are involved. So we have an opportunity to do that. But those data audit findings are being applied. So to Mike's point about some of the gaps now, some of these things are not equal. Some of these things are not like the other. So when we see, so if we go to the parent completion rate on our 5E survey in the fall, we went to the fall implementation so we could try to capture parents in coming out of student conferences. Okay, so we got a 29% average completion rate. 88% of those parents reported that they always talk about their children. They always talk to their children about their day on a daily basis.
88% of the 29%.
Of the 29%, correct, of the data that we collected.
40% of the time.
48% report having an active voice in the decision-making of the school. This was interesting to me. So it needs to be higher, but that actually was higher than I expected. I expected that to be quite low when we did this. I don't have any say in my school. This is a reflection of probably we had more response at the elementary level than we had at the secondary level. And at the elementary level, this would be a normal and reasonable takeaway. But we have a relatively decent degree of parents feeling like they have a say. But when we look at what's actually happening, like the deliverable of this involvement, we have 44% completing their PowerSchool parent portal sign up. That's not even how often it's used. This is just how much you sign up for. This is growth. If you remember when we talked about this a few months ago, I think it was in the 30%, even maybe high 20s. So we're growing in this area. 63% of students report their parents actively listening about their day. So slightly over half. So you know, another third are saying that they don't have that engagement. And then 30% of teachers report actively involving parents or involving parents in improving academic performance. So when our parents are thinking it's relatively high that they have a voice, our teachers, there's a mismatch. Right? Bringing all of these metrics to closer alignment is the key. And so we can see that by region, we did various parent participation. And so we have opportunities for greater engagement, dialogue, opening it up to conversation here tonight. From your perspective, we had a long conversation at DAC accreditation about this. It's an ongoing conversation about how to more deeply engage our families and community. The strategies for parents to support their own child's learning. I think the Big Kids Book Club is one example that we could really start to scale up, giving early reading strategies. Strategies for teachers to grow their parent involvement. And then strategies for principals to deepen parent and school engagement. I would say that we have this in fits and starts and in particular locations throughout the district. We have not done a good job at systematizing or really getting a consistent application of engagement with families and communities across our district.
Can you go back one? I just want to reemphasize the percents of percents. Sorry, the forward one now. There you go. So if only 29% of the parents on average took it, they are already showing a level of engagement. And so even though those numbers aren't very strong afterwards, though the indicator of seeing a high of 57% and a low of 0, if 0% of a parent group completes the 5E, there's zeros of everything there afterwards. And so I am certain that parents who are on the board are completing the 5 essentials. This is the highest level of parent engagement we could ever imagine. Our board members, our committee members, they represent a lot of that 29%. We're missing entire swaths of our community. And then we threw on the PowerSchool parent portal as the alternative. And John is not here. It's John's birthday tonight. So everybody, happy birthday, John.
You shouldn't be watching.
Should be watching, you should be watching because it's your birthday. This is the gift that keeps on giving, Dr. Colicky, come on. With only 44% of our parents actually seeking not to give feedback, but just to get access. Because Power School is about access to your child's progress. So we don't ask you any questions in Power School. We don't say, do you like it? Do you not like it? Do you want more of this? Do you want more of that? We just say, do you want to see if your kids are showing up to school and doing their homework? And we are only at 44% in spite of very strong engagement efforts. And so I just tee this up for the board that it's a great concern for me that these conversations we've been having about what makes for school success. Yesterday, I had the good fortune of meeting Governor Paulus for the Bright Spots Award. He came down to Roosevelt Charter School. He is a former charter school founder, and so the one school that he came to visit was Roosevelt. Of course, Chipeta was also a recipient. When we were there, I asked the staff, I said, boil down to me in just a couple of words what your success has been. And of course, they said, we're focused on students. And I said, that's awesome. I've never walked into a school that didn't tell me they were focused on students, so that's great. I said, dig deeper, what is it? And they said, we have incredible parent engagement. And so then I shared that experience of when I was at SELA at the International Day, and there must have been 800 people in that auditorium with only 300 students in the student body. The massive way of how some parents show up for schools, of which we have several schools that do that way as well. 57% is not a bad number. I think the thing that's missing for our student success is parents as partners. Big Kids Book Club gets a book at the house. First of all, we believe there are books in all our houses, but it reemphasizes, and we send a short list of these are things that you should be doing. But this is a two-way partnership. And what we want is a partnership with our parents that I imagine most of the parents here have very strong memories of reading books to their children when they were younger. How we arm and engage our families to be active. Parent volunteers in schools, you have access to our schools anytime you want to. Yes, we have safety protocols for it, but in an inviting way where parents feel that they're a part of the community. And I get a lot of those emails, and so I don't want to be gloom and doom, but they are certainly by pockets where we see it. And seeing a 0 on there literally says that somebody's just not paying attention to what's going on here. I mean, we act on this information in ways that if you don't have time to be a part of your SAC and you can't be at your DAC and you can't come give public comment here at a board meeting, you can influence the outcomes in the direction of the school district by participating in the 5Es. Yet we have a school that has a 0% take back. So.
Thank you. I want to say we ran a little bit of a natural experiment. The ice cream social was the effective one.
Thank you for the feedback, okay. We will bring it back next year, provided the board members all agree on it and want to go in that direction. To piggyback on what Superintendent Gall talks about, in the fall, the board reviewed 15 priority improvement and turnaround school plans. And then those school plans come in front of the board for board approval. And we have public comments specifically open at that time for school community members from those 15 schools. Very rarely do we ever get a comment from there, from a community member that comes and says, this is a concern to me. What are you, school board, doing to hold the school accountable for student outcomes? You are not doing your elected responsibilities, or what is Superintendent Gall doing? In the time that I've served on the board, we have heard multiple priority improvement and turnaround schools. And we call that 6 o'clock, we set aside everything and call for the 6 o'clock. Parents don't come and engage and say, this is a concern. This is what I would like to see in our schools. So, back to you. Just sharing my thoughts on that.
Yeah. I think this is another great use of the design thinking space, because we need to be thinking in ways that are, trip over here, we need to be thinking in ways that are market sensitive, like that are responsive to our markets. Clearly our traditional ways are responsive to a very select market, right? It's a different person who becomes a DAC member. So we want to expand that notion to what is a driving factor to have a voice of a family. I am really excited about seeing the results of having dedicated language interpreters and speakers. interpreters and
Translators.
Translator, good grief, thank you. Yes, translators. So interpreters and translators, not in the sense of a transactional, right? Here's what you say and here's what you do and here's how you fill out that form. That's important. But as an embedded piece of a community, because we are getting very little to no input in the big chunks of our communities simply because possibly they are non-English speakers. So it's always been a passion of ours. We've seen it in centralized enrollment to really, when you have somebody in the space that is engaging and willing to bring in someone who is intimidated by that space, you get amazing things happening. You get a conversation that at one point was really stilted, really slow, and kind of isolating, to having conversations that go on for like 45 minutes with laughter and engagement, right? I think we need to grow in that area. I think we have the opportunity with the resources that we have. So these are just very quickly, I won't go through them specifically, but this is tying, so all this 5E stuff, we're investing a lot of time and effort into it. How does it actually relate to our district data? And it has significant impacts on our district data. These are our benchmarks. So this is basically just a comparison or a correlation between a 5E metric if you are well organized or very well organized in the green, right? What does that look like for math and ELA scores within our own context? So you reviewed that, you could see that there is a significant impact. This is a little slightly older data. I will run this again with our most recent end of year data that we just have collected. So I'll send that out to the board once we get that run.
And can you categorize that? That's a 20% difference, just rough math. You're in the upper 50s to 40s. So yeah, that's 10% would be 4 or 5.
15%.
Yeah, noting though that it's meeting growth. So I think about, in the case of a well-organized school, we have students that are moving up in the pack. Right? So if you think about, like, growth is at 50, I'm keeping pace with the pack. Anything below, the pack is kind of starting to pass me up. Anything above, I'm starting to move up in the pack. So when we have a strong or well-organized school, we are moving students up in that package, in that grouping of students. Where not yet organized, we're sliding backwards. So when we do something called, basically, it's a correlation of feature analysis and look at the measures. So these are student-reported measures. So from the voice of students, it's a rough metric, it's a survey, but from the voice of students taking this survey, the one that's most strongly correlated to math growth within our own data, academic engagement, rigor, and safety. Like, this isn't rocket science, right? So this are students saying, we want rigor, but we also want voice, right? Finding that balance and being able to push our students harder because they have buy-in. Back to that course clarity need, that need for course clarity. When we look at ELA, again, it's academic rigor. Peer support kind of undergirds the interactive nature of ELA. Math is also interactive, but probably maybe not to the same degree, and then study habits are in both. So giving students study habits and habits of mind that really serve them well. All right, so these are just the overall results and changes over time for your reference. So try to give you a deep dive into each essential by school compared to previous years. So that's what these appendices are giving you.
Can you just go through the regions, since we kind of talk regionally?
It's on a different report.
Oh, that's on a different topic?
That's on the executive summary. So
can we do it that way instead of going line by line?
You can pull that report.
yeah, if you can pull the executive summary by area, I think area superintendent is the title, but it's by region.
Sorry,
Go ahead.
you're gonna go into the executive summary too, right? After you go, okay.
Area?
By area soups, yeah.
Exec summary by, yeah. Yeah, that's the one.
All right, so again, there we go. Okay, so across all Northeast schools, these are the summary results. So neutral, and generally statistically, as we start to pool more and more students, we start to move more into the neutral. Just simply because you're pooling more schools.
Go to the one with the by-year comparison.
Yeah, the next page. Right there.
There we go. Okay, so what you're looking at here, years going across the top, northeast area schools going down. And so you can see that over time, how have our overall rankings essential changed within. So not yet organized is you're weak in at least one area, you're red in at least one area. Well organized, you hit that three greens threshold. Organized, you're probably in like two green areas. Okay.
Any questions on the northeast
Yeah.
from the board? Why don't we just stop and go by region?
Yeah.
Questions or concerns?
Well, I can start off. I think some of these schools, I'll start off with the good things that I see. Some of these schools showed incredible progress. The thing that pops out to me, and this is verified by numerous other data too, is freedom. It's progressing in the right direction with the new leadership in there, and the parent participation is really good too, the community participation, and the 5 essentials data is a reflection of that. Even some of the schools like Carver that have been 3 successive years and not yet organized is moving in the right direction. Fremont is moving in the right direction. And so many good things that are happening out here. I think Martinez, not yet organized, again, that might be the discrepancy that you were talking about. Because I still think that there are some good things happening out there. And even at Sabin, where it has been 3 years of struggle out there, especially last year, where they started from, when you go internally into the data, they are trending in the right direction now. It's just going to take a little bit of time where Sabin started from last year as opposed to where they are here. It's trending in the right direction. The one major concern I had was Jenkins Middle School. There was a change in leadership out there, and it was well organized, and now it's gone down 2 levels. There was a complete change in leadership, not only.
They moved 4 people out of Jenkins.
Yeah, all the principals and assistant principals left at that time. So Jenkins was the one that stood out to me in the concern side to some extent. Any other thoughts from the board?
When did the staff take this? I know parents was the fall, but when did staff do it? Was it
February, January and February.
Yeah.
So it was the same time as students.
So like with a new principal in a building, they've had about 4 months to interact with staff, and then the results are showing that timing. Okay. I mean, I can go, I don't have specific by area, it's more of a just in general, my takeaways or things I noticed. I mean, I completely agree with Mr. Gall. I like how you put it of a partnership, that we as a district have an opportunity there to really step up, and how do we partner with parents and get that engagement. I noticed just some discrepancies.
Right. Let's come to that if it's okay. At the end of it, if you have area things, let's quickly
No, I
talk
don't
because
have
I think
specific areas.
he's
I wanna go
got to
through
go
the
through the
other
rest of the
4 areas.
areas.
I mean, I reviewed them, I just
Okay.
don't have comments. It's
Any
kind of
other
like I'm
comments
taking
just on the
data.
northeast area? Anything that stand out to you or questions you had? Otherwise, we can move to the next area.
Want to highlight Russell?
Yeah, Russell, Russell Freedom were the ones that really stood out there. Keller is going in the right direction too, and
Let's
King.
go to, are there any questions on northeast? Okay, let's go to west. So overall, strong in 2 areas. We have consistent strength at Chipeta as well as Bristol.
Again, the one that stood out was what Superintendent Gall talked about, Buena Vista, where it seems like the data, whether it is from the formative assessments that we give, that doesn't seem to be matching with that 5 essentials data. And so why is it that that's not happening?
So, and I think that's just a really important sentence. We don't really see these as matches. We don't want them to validate what we believe. Data is an indicator always available for further investigation. So I love when we say these are the things that we like that we see, but we have to acknowledge that they are also giving us other data points. Cameron, you want to come comment on some of the turnaround work?
Yeah, I'll say something really quickly. I would just offer, and apologize if you've already said this, David, but in looking at each of the area datas, and then just some of the things you were doing with interrogating when it's going up or down, I think, you know, it is complex, just like our superintendent was saying. It's one piece overall for us to look at. The great summary that David gave, you know, in terms of what the University of Chicago and what they've developed tells us if you have repeated low scores within indicators, that's all true. When David set up time specifically with the people from the University of Chicago to go through 5E research, one of the things they did highlight is they do notice schools, specifically in turnaround, that are implementing lots of changes at once, that you will see a dip. And they have case studies to support that. I don't think we got the exact right case studies, but overall, like that you will see. You can see that by area, even in just some of the examples we've gone over, that there could potentially be those sorts of things. And it's not, you know, a negative reflection. It's actually that a lot of those things are being implemented now. If you continue to see that over time and we don't see that even out, that is something to look at. So I just wanted to highlight that from.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing that up, because I think that is an indicator of Martinez. They are doing a lot of heavy lifting in a very short period of time.
Yeah.
And so a lot of that can be reflected in a.
So, but when we see a trend going over 3 or 4 years, then it becomes a cause for concern.
Yes, maybe schools, you know, not in the turnaround status with implementing those sorts of changes with leadership, with strategy.
Any questions on West?
I mean, one thing that you want to give credit to is Holmes. A year when they had not been organized, and you said 2 or 3 levels they went up. That's impressive. Whatever that they are doing out there, the leadership, the building leadership, it's working. And some of that is maybe we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We can copy some of their best practices and apply in other schools.
That's what's exciting about the design lab, the design thinking process with middle school. All these conversations were already naturally happening in that very first session. I do want to point out also Coronado being our first high school that's been organized.
And it's showing a consistent pattern where it's going in that direction. So.
Okay, let's go through the other 2 regions so we can get to the other part of the executive summary and some more robust conversation.
So we can see to the point, I think President Malpacum, you made consistent, not yet organized.
Yeah. And that causes like Man Middle School. It's, you know, over 4 years, and the data doesn't seem to be improving when you even dive into the inside of the data. And Palmer, I'm not sure why the trend is that way. So I know that there is a change in leadership at that school this year because of Principal Disney's retirement. So.
I do want to call out Queen Palmer. Early indications for end of year data have them as the 3rd highest performing school in the system, as well as the highest performing title school in the system. And if you want to talk about consistency of leadership and message, you know, I said on camera, I don't know if it ever actually made the roll or not, but I think our message for Queen Palmer is if you're worried about your child having learning loss over COVID, take them to Queen Palmer, because we'll make up 1.5 years worth of learning in 1 year. I mean, she's at, Principal Butcher's at upper 60s for her end of year growth. Now, I know that's STAR data, interim assessment. We don't know how correlated that is to CMAS, but if you want to learn how to learn, go to Queen Palmer.
Yeah. Or learn how to teach.
Everybody learns how to learn.
Yeah, it was.
She won't let you leave until you've learned how to learn something.
You can be a janitor. You walk in, the floors are shining. And
it is the most immaculate 60-year-old building you're ever.
See that? It was just everything. You could feel all the attention to detail everywhere.
Yes. Okay, let's roll the next region. our southeast. Tale of two cities.
Yeah.
We'll have Grant as our school spotlight next week, so you'll all be able to ask some questions about the steady growth there. I certainly saw the school spotlight at Henry last year when I was interviewing, when I was watching some back brief items. And we've highlighted the work happening in Moreau several times. And so I do love the proving the impossible possible, as people will show you that, well, we can't and it's too hard. We have 3 school leaders who have been very consistent over time and have been there for a period of time to be able to have that consistency. And then as we already described, to David's point, the challenges in middle schools, you can see there both at Galileo and Swigert continuing to struggle. And then of course we are constantly talking about our challenges at Mitchell.
Yeah.
It was disappointing to see that little slide back after last year having it partially organized.
Interestingly, at Mitchell, some of their higher measures were related to English instruction and math instruction. So there is work happening that I think, Sherry can speak to this much more coherently than I can, but there is work that's happening within the departments, it appears, that would be pushing ambitious instruction further ahead, but that is not the trend we want to see.
I think that stands out also to me is Penrose. There, the principal, you talked about Katie, I think schoolmaster, she took the school in the middle of the school year, October, and she didn't even have the 4 months that you're talking about before the survey. She had 2 months or 3 months, and to go from not yet organized to organized.
I do want to.
Penrose.
Penrose.
I went and met with her. I think she was on the job for a week, maybe a week and a half. And she was a great example. She had a team in her building that was already dedicated, a team of teachers that had established kind of a working group, a 5E working group to really look at strategies. When she came in, she honored that work and continued and actually put some additional fuel behind it. So it's a great example of a leader stepping into a context and honoring the work that's already happening in her UPC. I think you see the results there.
Yeah. So Mitchell is a concern. We just need to figure out, that's on the state watch. We got to figure out what is it, a year from now, if we don't see the progress in Mitchell, it's going to be a different conversation at that time.
And remember, in that not yet organized, this is a statistical relationship, so there's variability to it, but at that red stage, you have less than a 10% chance of seeing. Within their sample of schools, University of Chicago, you have less than a 10% chance of seeing significant academic improvement until you address those weakest areas. So just to undergird your point, it's a time pressing matter.
Okay, anything further on this?
Nope, just one more. I think we asked for a high school comparison just to show some of the challenges that we have been talking all year about our secondary experience. We certainly saw a middle school theme here. They're easier to compare because a lot of the regions have multiple middle schools.
And this,
opportunity schools.
Thank you.
They seem to be doing well for most part.
Can't scroll.
So have those other charter schools stopped doing the 5 essentials? CVOG, Community Prep, Globe, and also all those?
They just didn't meet the 50% threshold. Yeah. They did it. There wasn't a zero, I don't. Globe might have had close to a zero. I'd need to look that up. But yeah, they just didn't meet the threshold. I do think this comes back to really that course clarity and a real clear purpose as to why, as a student, I'm at an opportunity school. Right? There's just a clear focus as to what, as an Odyssey student, who I am and what I'm doing.
It's like all 4 years of well organized out there, and the data reflects that too. Achieve Online too, who was the school spotlight last week. Yeah, we can move on. Okay. Yeah.
Just the comprehensives.
David, how did we take 5 essentials during that COVID year? Because it does seem like there's an anomaly for many of our schools, popped green in COVID year.
Yeah.
And so we still took them,
We did.
and that's just, everyone was just feeling that, hey, we did the best that we could given the
Yeah.
challenges that we had, so on and so forth.
Yeah, we're in this together. It was at that kind of stage of the thing. And I mean, they hadn't been in and out, either at best in and out of buildings or not in buildings for a while. We thought it was good to keep the consistency.
Okay, seeing no further discussion on this, you can.
Okay.
Is that it? Are we done? Or do you want me to give that
For the
focus?
sake of time, if there's any questions on the broad overview executive summary.
I'll go with Director Nelson. I apologize for
No, that's
interrupting.
okay.
So this is done. So now back to your summary
Yeah.
that you were doing.
One of the things that really stood out to me, kind of going back to the partnership idea, that it definitely is an opportunity for us as a district, and it in the area superintendent document, you don't have to go to it. It speaks to a lot of the areas. The highest performing measure was parent influence on decision making in schools, and one of the pages specified that it was the teachers are the ones providing the answer, and that was helpful to know, like, who is it that's giving the answer. It wasn't necessarily the parents on that one. But then when I look at slide, let me find it, sorry. It's on the PowerPoint presentation where you have the breakdown of the equals that doesn't equal. It's slide 12, if you want to go through it. Yeah, so then it says that 30% of teachers report actively involving parents in programs designed to improve academic performance. So it just struck me that in one aspect, teachers are saying they think parents are highly involved in decision making in their schools, but then we see here that they also recognize there could be greater involvement in how they're bringing their families in. And so it just seemed like a little bit of a disconnect in what the data was showing, like how in one place it showed there was high involvement and in another not. And I think that, let me look at my notes really quick. When I consider the aspects about this one, this piece really jumped out at me. The lack of staff and students feeling safe in our schools. On one of the documents, it defined it as not being external necessarily, but more internal. So I'm very glad we're doing the safety audit and that we're going to address, you know, security vestibules and everything. But you know, the definition was that teachers are concerned about stealing, disorder in the hallways, threats, physical conflict, physical threats from students. And I just see that as being the trickle effect of when we look at student-teacher trust and student or peer, I don't remember how it was worded, that those two things were highlighted as the major areas we need to work on. To me, it's okay, we really need to get a handle on behavior and discipline, and that in turn is partnering with families and parents, and how do we make sure that people are having learning environments that they can actually learn in. And I mean, that was like my number one thing that jumped out to me.
I agree. That's probably the biggest red flag for my takeaway as well.
Yeah.
So even in a place like Holmes, which was our middle school that jumped 3 levels, then you're doing some intensive work on student culture. their teacher safety, feelings of teacher safety, which is the item that was weak, and student safety was weak. So these are, I mean, climate and culture and trust takes time to build back. I would say that if I have a case study of someone a leader who really took this head on, add some degree of social capital, right? He took some heat for some of the ways that he approached it. We see the results, but down at that level of safety and trust, it's just a slower responding. It's a slower responding thing. But to your point, I completely agree. This is a huge area.
Yeah, I mean, my biggest, like, if I were to summarize, like, where we want to go forward with this information, my two, like, tasks that I would have us come up with, whether it's us asking admin or us as a board, is it policy? How can we, because that's what we do policy. How can we help with these things? It would be parent engagement and priority of the behavior discipline issues. Like, we have to get a handle on that. And what have we been doing, and what can we change to? And that would just be my ask, I guess, of admin to consider. And I don't know, like, how long that takes to figure it out. Is it over the summer, you guys? Because in my mind, I'm thinking it would be great if we could have, like, something in place where in the fall, when staff are coming back, maybe it's one of the professional development offerings, you know what I mean? And then we can hit the ground running in the fall and just have our schools be much better learning environments.
I think you're right on. I just listened to you speak and you taking the data, taking the highest components, the highest performing measures, and looking at the lowest and using that to inform, add to, adjust what we've delivered on, what we've put forward as our multi-year plan or our yearly plan, right, with our unified improvement plan. And so with that, like, it is pretty amazing when Dr. Colicky was going over the most improved areas, to have over 10-point growth in collaborative practices, reflective dialogue, and quality professional development means we can capitalize on the strengths that we've built in our plan. Double-digit growth is what you want to see. The most declined measures are the bookend of that, right? They're the closest to a double-digit growth in the opposite way, in the way that we don't want to see. And what we learned from coming out of the pandemic was that that it was crucially important to focus on academic overall instruction, acceleration of learning, and social, emotional, and mental health connected to all the things that you were talking about. Parent engagement, behavior and discipline. Already been, like, the teams are working on right now in combination with area superintendents, with our academics leadership team, and David and his team making adjustments based on the data we had. We've got several data points, and this is a major one. At the same time, with the charge, again, another charge from our superintendent, how are we cohesively getting out in front of our professional learning plan tied to the data that we're seeing? So one of the things that we see that we need to have a stronger, more coordinated effort in terms of professional learning is exactly that, with connected to mental health, social, emotional learning, behavior, and parent engagement. We tie it under social, emotional health, but it has those components with it. And doubling down on and changing the things that are working really well, to go deeper on that, right? Get everybody a chance to get better at the things they learned this year while adding on the places we haven't been able to address.
I just want to emphasize the interconnectivity between all these conversations and a really robust both induction or training and coaching plan that connects to staffing. A high functioning school, a green school, can go through a series of body blows and right hooks and survive that because it's high functioning. When you're teetering and you're down to I'll use the bus drivers as the example. One more bus driver calls out sick, and then you just can't support 3 schools because that one bus driver can exit. When we're on that razor's edge, things like student behaviors and discipline can be completely disruptive, where when that same issue is plopped into a green school, if we're just using 5 E's, or a well-oiled machine or a high-functioning school, there are systems and supports that easily come in and de-escalate and get the appropriate services. And so that, every time we talk about these things, we have to remember that if we don't have the people and we're not compensating our staff to be in those spaces, then we run the risk of those single points of failure, of which any one child, intentionally or unintentionally, can be that single disruption. And now if you all go back into your brains and think about the complaints that you get when they come to your level and match it against the schools and the colors, you'll see kind of that consistency there, which is many of the schools that have been green for many years are not the ones that are coming as complaints because we have the resources in space to be able to handle that. Our children are still certainly rebounding from their COVID experience. There's this 2-year bubble of kids that we're going to be talking about for another 8 or 9 years until they're through the system. And so the students, particularly when they change school settings, go from elementary school to middle school, there's a new manifestation of those behaviors. And if systems aren't in place, then they are exasperated and exaggerated. Same thing as we get to high school.
Yeah, and just the importance of partnering with parents I'm thinking I heard a story once of when a child was just so unruly that the principal said, your mom has to come sit with you in class. And that turned it around pretty fast because that's pretty embarrassing to have mom. And the mom's pretty mad that she has to, take a day off of work or whatever to come and sit with her child in school. And so those kinds of things, bringing the parents into the conversation too, because I'm not saying that we need professional development for staff because they're the ones that, it's not that at all. I mean, it's so many levels of COVID. It's at home, how can the people at home support the behaviors and expectations that we need in our schools? And we want kids in the class. We don't want to kick them out every time, go to the principal's office, because we know they need to be in the classroom. But at the same time, if they're disrupting the class for all the 29 other kids, that's not fair either. And so
it's a two-way communication street and partnership all the way. I do the reintegration meetings. Sherry and I did one today, and I've never yet once seen a parent come in with a defensive attitude. They are aghast to find out that what was the issue at Coronado? We lost 70% of the kids that day. We never figured out who was the kid that posted that one. But when kids make posts that threaten the entirety of the school, that shuts the school down, those parents are like, you might have a lot of problems, this is not going to be one that you're going to have again. And I think it's just communication. And so when I break that down into saying that, and we trace that back to a nexus, and many of our children are making violent threats because they have either had a bullied experience or some other unresolved trauma. So we do recognize that. So children aren't guilty, but there is some level of accountability that we need to work through to make sure that we get there. And those conversations are eye-opening to see and to hear how our parents are sometimes disconnected from what's happening in the school. And so the relation I make to them is your student's social media post threatening an entire school community is like walking into the airport and saying bomb, or saying I think I have a terrorist act I want it. Every adult immediately makes that switch and they get it. They're like, right, I get it. Can't say bomb in the airport anymore. So then they immediately look to their kid and they say, these are not the behaviors. And so I think it's a partnership of where we're asking parents to be more engaged. Right now, we rely on the technology for that to happen. You can track all these things in PowerSchool, but I think to this point of the safety that we're feeling, we need a more active campaign in communicating what is working and then make sure we're addressing directly to parents the challenges that we have and not thinking that it's monolithic that we can solve it on our own.
I'll come to you 1 minute. Director Jurgensen, Director Jurgensen.
A few follow-up points to what Director Nelson has already mentioned. Similar concerns, the peer-to-peer trust, the teacher-to-peer trust. You know, I think some of the safety of our staff and safety of our students has to do with the discipline, but I think the discipline is not a core problem in all cases. I think it's probably a symptom of, could be, you know, lack of best first instruction or lack of other tools that a school might need to create an orderly and safe learning environment. And so I think that you know, those things should be considered. The other thing I think about is, you know, looking at, I mean, how long have we been doing restorative justice? And, you know, we talk about evaluating programs all the time, and if they work, is restorative justice working for our schools? Is it, you know, is it something where we want to put that autonomy back into the building leadership that says, hey, restorative justice might work for, you know, level 1, level 2, or who, you know, based on how it wants to be adapted. But there are studies after studies that show if you're not all in on restorative justice, it's just busy work and puts kids back in settings where they're going to misbehave again without any lack of consequences. And that's not a blanket statement that says, you know, Director Jorgensen doesn't believe in restorative justice. It's just saying, at one point, do we need to evaluate the effectiveness of this type of practice in our schools if we are seeing such disruptive and unruly behavior? You know, are we having other things in place that would be more effective, or could we evaluate that? That might be a future piece to look at. And then lastly, I'll end with the parent engagement piece. We definitely need some help from our parents and guardians. You know, just like Ms. Russell with the food thing, you know, we are tasked with, you know, numerous tasks that we don't get funded for, that we just figure out how to solve. And luckily we have great teammates and members in our community that, and in our D11 workforce that jump on that and solve it for us. And we need parents to do the same now. You know, we want them involved. We want parents, you know, in SACs and in DACs and in PTAs. And some can't do that. We understand. And like Mr. Gall said, take this survey, help us help inform us what's going on. But maybe we need to look at something a little bit further, whether it be policy or, you know, some sort of board level work that that says, hey, we want some sort of collaboration document or policy between the district and parents that says, you know, it's a give and take, and we're both in it for the educational program and benefit of your child. So I know that was a mouthful, and with these headphones on, I can only hear myself, so I don't get to hear any questions. So I'll be quiet now and hear what you guys have.
Dr. Loma.
Well, it's pretty clear to me that we have a parent interaction problem. I think all studies have shown that parent involvement improves a child's chances of getting a better education. But I think, and speaking, if I go back to when I pulled my kids out of public school, my reasonings, the reasonings I had then were half as bad as they are now. And so parents have not been shown the proper respect at times, not by all teachers, but, and I say it not individually, but as a system. So I think the best thing for public education was the pandemic, because it allowed parents to see what was going on. And we now know that what the parents saw shocked them, and to the point where almost a revolution took place, because they did not like what was going on in public school. That was been going on for decades. When I was first on the board, we were fighting about bathrooms, and that didn't seem like a big deal. Okay, but what happened during the last 2 decades or so, a political ideology crept into public education and widened the gap. When I was in school, my parents trusted my school. In fact, they trusted them so much that I would rather get whooped by my principal than have them tell my mom or dad if I got educated. Now there is no trust. That political ideology has created a big gap, and they think this is the place to do that, which it's not. When you look at families listening to talk about protecting a young mother at 14 and showing her how to kill her baby, that doesn't breed trust. It may make some group happy, but it doesn't breed trust in general. And I think the proof of that is we lost 10,000 of our most active parents. We've lost them, and they went to charter schools and other schools, and those are the active ones because you have to be active to start a charter school. And they left, and they're never coming back unless we change our ways. I was watching an interview of the Secretary of Education today. They're in Washington, D.C., which is kind of funny. One of the senators asked him, can you define a woman? And he couldn't, or he wouldn't. Now, we don't live on an island. Everybody sees that. And so that does not build trust in public education when the Secretary of Education can't define a woman. Okay? So that all has come into our district. And you think the parents are going to trust you? No. The ones that are in our education, probably, and that's not all, I'm not blanketing, but many of them that are in our education system now have no choice. They can't afford to go somewhere else. They have to be, and so they're here. And those are the ones in general that we have. The ones that have a choice, well, we know where they're leaving. And if we don't do something drastic by showing parents we trust, that we respect them, that's the bottom line. That we recognize that these are your kids, and you've allowed us the privilege of educating your children. It's not like that. It's like we're educating your kids, you should be glad we're educating them. And that does not build respect or trust. Not in my neighborhood. Then you have other things going on. Oh my goodness. The state of Washington just passed a law saying that if a child wants to change a transition, they can take the child from the parent. You think that's going to increase trust? That law just passed for not allowing that child to become a boy to a girl. Okay? That's just like mind blowing. You can't dress up a child as an Indian. I'm Native American. You can't not let a child pretend to be an Indian without offending somebody, but you can let a man pretend to be a woman, and that's okay. This is what we're facing. Let's talk about it. That law, that same type of law right now is in the Senate in California. In Colorado, it's California Light. Something is not right. The Planned Parenthood director I just read yesterday, who was the communications director for all of Planned Parenthood, committed suicide because he's a child pornographer. And that organization is in our schools. So we just keep going like we're going. We're not going to attract anybody, and you can have all the data you want and say, what's going on? Well, let's talk about what's going on. And it's much deeper than the data points and the instruction, because the teachers are working hard at trying to do it, and they can't solve it. Why? Because the families don't trust them. So we have to work there. It's not more training, it's more trust. And where trust does not exist, leadership ceases to exist. So if they don't trust you, I don't care what you do, you'll never be able to lead the parents along the way. They'll just be waiting for a time to leave. And we have to build trust. Focus on that, and everything else will get better. And that's my 2 cents.
Okay, thank you. Director Bankus, I'll come to you, Dr. Colley. I don't see your hand up. Do you have any thoughts or questions? You had something to say?
Yeah. I wanted to point out with the opportunity schools that even our
Muted?
Yeah.
Yeah, you are okay. Do you need anything to say on this topic?
I was going to say that I'm glad to have a healthy conversation around parent involvement and how it is that we can build back the trust that most of us in this room enjoyed when we were students in school in our K-12. I think this robust conversation means that we will be energized to continue to seek ways in which to involve our parents and give them give them the support they need to know that they are our partners and we are partners with them. So thank you.
Dr. K, back to you.
I just wanted to point out one trend among our opportunity schools is all of them, regardless of their overall rating, all of them were strong or very strong in teacher-student trust. So this is Tesla to Achieve to Digital to Odyssey. And I just wanted to point that out because I do think there are many strengths of our opportunity academies. One of their strongest ones is that students, there's a very clear course clarity there, meaning students are there for a purpose and the students can articulate that purpose pretty well.
Yeah.
And so when we see that is a core critical piece, I think that really starts to build that trust. And as we build teacher-student trust, we start to generate new opportunities for engagement with families and community. So I think that all of that to say these are all just it's an overlapping puzzle that has some really interesting trends in it.
That also came earlier in the year with the graduation requirements, where we can provide some flexibility to the students. So students take classes that is going to engage them in the classroom. If we are going to push on them classes that they have no interest in, then they disengage from that. So providing them opportunities through various other schools that are there, that they can travel to those schools, whether it's Wasson or Doherty, or they can go between campuses so they can take engaging classes.
And these are some of
we
our
do
fastest
see
growing.
some trend out there, and I'll come to you, Director Art, you have comments too. Okay, well, go ahead.
Oh, why don't you go ahead and
No,
address?
go ahead, finish your
Okay.
thoughts.
I was gonna note that behavior-wise, there's been an issue across the country. So it's not, I just wanna have us keep that in mind, it's not just District 11. And I have to agree with you, Director Nelson, that, our safety audit, that's great, but I think the problems may be more internal and it is about behavior. And some of it is family, but I don't necessarily know that it's going to be addressed just by instruction either. So I have that concern. But if it is, fabulous. But I don't think it's just something we can lay at the feet of a teacher not following through on best first instruction. It can be engaging in many different ways. And the kids are an issue across the country, really. The other thing, just for responses, last year we had the Great Ice Cream Challenge. And did the rates go up this year because people are more aware of the survey and its value when it came to families, or did it go down? How was that impacted, if it was at all?
Let me pull that up, I believe.
And moving it to October, did that help you?
That's another question. And was it only available at parent-teacher conferences, or was it a window that would be part of the follow-up there?
Yeah, it was a window and
Okay.
a link went out, and then a lot of schools use parent-teacher conferences as an opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
I can pull those averages, but I think off the top of my head, it was slightly higher with the ice cream.
I will say the schools play a really big role in it, and the teachers, if it's at the parent-teacher conference, remembering to tell the parents about it, but then also the school level, if they send out one email only, parents are gonna forget, the need of reminders. And same with people signing up for Power School, I have that written down, but it's up to the teacher to provide the student ID number to the families, and if they're not doing that, then the families don't have the information they need to sign up. And they're not gonna go actively go ask it, that's a lot of work to go ask the teacher, hey, I need my kid's ID number so I can sign up for this thing over here. When they hit that roadblock, I'll do it later, and then it doesn't happen. So, sorry I interrupted you.
We are working on solutions for a Power School. I promise you that if you want to buy something on Amazon, it doesn't let you go.
True.
Right, so we'll solve that. We'll solve that piece, which will help the communication on 5 Essentials. Because, I'll hear all the time, the bus was late. I'll go and I'll track, and the bus routing team sent the email that said the bus will be late. But if somebody doesn't have their phone checking their email, which is their preferred form of communication, they don't get information that the bus was late. right? So multiple ways that we can contact people instead of just relying on people to open up their email or to go to our webpage to see what's available.
And if you get that information to us anytime, I'd just be curious, but it might impact how, administration or the board follows up with how to encourage that. If ice cream's a strategy, well, maybe we do that. And I also feel impelled to address the fact that Director Loma's comments are pretty spacious in nature. I'm not sure that's the word I want. Just, you make statements as if they are fact. And I would say, based on the feedback we've even had on the proposed pronoun language, please don't interrupt me. The language that was proposed, I think in general, the feedback this board has seen has been against changing the wording so that it is restrictive. And society is changing, and LGBTQ people are being accepted more and more in our culture. And there are plenty of accusations to go around with people maybe on the left, but certainly on the right as well, if we're going to be partisan. So I have concerns about some of those comments, and they aren't necessarily data we have. And so I don't think, well, we might have a greater conversation about them at some point. I don't think they are something we can address here with this information. And without a survey of trust in our schools, and specifically asking about LGBTQ things, and that's where it seems to me you're taking that conversation, I don't think we can include that criticism at this point. So just have to put that out there. Thank you. Do you have questions?
If I may, real quick, and then I need to just as an announcement, I'm going to
Go ahead.
hop and help with
Kids' bedtime. But to Director Ott's points, behavior across the country is up. Half of the kids across the country can't read. Do we use that as an excuse for us in D11? We got to take care of our district based on what data we have available, which is plenty here, and we want to act on it. The second piece is that, there's national moves of all sorts of things, national LGBTQ moves, national, XYZ moves. Parents are the ones that need to be in this space. And that's what I think our discussion, to both Director Ott's and Director Al's points, parents are the ones that need to be involved and engaged in our district with what we're doing with our kids and our community, because that's where we're going to get the biggest dividends for the efforts that we put into it.
Completely.
Yeah, I don't think anybody disagrees with that. So how do we increase that parent engagement in our schools? So our teachers are also feeling we talked about a charter school just a little while back, and Superintendent Gall talked about 800 parents being in the school for a meeting with 300 students in there. We want that type of parent participation in our schools. And also parents volunteering in our school. I think that charter school, there was a DAC thing that even said that they asked their parents to volunteer at 30 hours, every parent to volunteer 30 hours in their school. Now, we can't ask all our parents to do that, but somewhere we got to be able to get support and partnership with our parents. And it's a two-way street, that we earn the trust of our parents, and at the same time, we also ask for parent help in managing some of the student behaviors that are manifesting in our classroom. And we can only do so much in support. Hopefully the parents can partner with us in getting the students prepared to come for a whole day of instruction at the
But having started a charter school, and we do this, we ask them, we want so many of your parents to fill out this paperwork and show that they want this school to happen. If we did it to our schools, we'd have to shut down half of them, right? And to start a charter school, you start with engaged parents. And like I said earlier, those parents, because of the way public school has operated and is operating, have left for those reasons. And we can't even, we're so blind to the fact that we're in public school, we don't want to admit, why are they leaving? Because apparently we're doing something wrong. When they go to these schools to start them, guess what? They trust the people with their kids. And the parents, the administrators respect the parents. So public school has shown that they do not respect the parents' rights, bottom line. The parent, we can do what we want to your child and you have no rights. And you have to start there. There's no other way, because right now the parents don't believe that they have any rights to their children when they're sent into public school. And little by little, they're losing them. They're losing those rights. We need to delineate their rights and put the parent at the top of the totem pole, not at the bottom. Put them on the top. That we're here because of you. When you start recognizing that and making the parent feel that they're important, they'll want to be more involved. Right now, they're the least important because of the way things have been doing for so long. And we're used to doing it so long, we don't even know what we're doing wrong.
Any other thoughts or comments? I mean, a takeaway is that we need to improve parent engagement and earn the trust of our parents, and at the same time expect our parents to also partner in their students' education. Parents have to take responsibility for that part of it, that they are partners in education, and when parent involvement is high, student outcomes are higher too. So is there anything that we as a board then can collectively do to promote that parent engagement in our schools? That's something that's food for.
You have to respect every parent's right to their child. That's why I look at it. Whatever the parent decides they want to do with their child, well, that's their child. We have to respect their home. We don't respect their home. We expect them to adhere to public school.
Well, we want to be inclusive of all children and all parents.
Or respect their home.
Yeah, that is what it is. Now, what is applicable, what I may find as acceptable, Director Nelson may not find as acceptable.
Correct.
We got to find that inclusiveness where my student or my child is also accepted in the classroom environment, the same one that
Right,
Dr.
like,
Nelson.
in other words, this place should be apolitical, but it's not. It's so far left, it's falling over.
I mean, going back to your question of, as a board, like I mentioned earlier, okay, we do policy, that's our job. And so what does that look like of, we know we want to address a parent engagement issue, and so I know that policy committee, the DAC, and D11 Engage recently brought a update to the current policy KBs, something about parent engagement that is in the works. But you know, maybe it's like we take a crack at something, some document that's like just putting a stake in the ground. We're making a commitment to our parents of, we will respect your beliefs. All students are welcome. All families are welcome. We want to be inclusive and respect all beliefs. How do we be apolitical?
Yeah.
And then also, parents, we in turn need your help and
Correct.
want your support, and for you to own your children's education as well. So I don't know, maybe I'll noodle on it if there's something that we could do policy-wise.
Yeah, and I think if we do that, regardless of belief, and that's the right, this is America, you can believe what you want. But we're not here to come against or stand up for it.
Okay. We're
We're here to educate. Right there, that has nothing to do with anything else. Our board priorities have nothing to do with anything else but that. What is infiltrated in is all kinds of stuff. I can't even recognize it.
Okay. You had, okay, go ahead.
Just, I think Dr. Collickley's slide with regards to our student, parent, and teacher perception data just offers some, I thought the 3 bullet points there really kind of were really connected to what we can do about the data. And I just, the 3 things were strategies for parents to support their child's learning, strategies for teachers to grow their parent involvement, and strategies for principals to deepen parent and school engagement.
Yeah.
And I think like that's great because it's directly tied to the survey, what we're seeing in the results, and also a place where we can link into with major improvement strategy to there. So while this conversation doesn't seem finished, we actually have some great things that we can take and go forward.
Okay, and this kind of takes us to the segue of Dr. X. You can come and join me. So I think Director Nelson talked about the policy KB that is in works out there, which talks about parent engagement. Maybe I know that we are here to talk about whistleblower policy, but is that a policy that the board can provide some feedback at some point in time? Is that gone through the policy committee? Where is it? And then the board can provide some feedback on parent engagement, or would it be a separate policy that we need to look at to increase parent engagement in our
policy? KB was introduced to the policy committee. Policy committee asked for some revisions to that to be brought back. We have one policy committee meeting left, so I don't think that we'll have it, but the board can take a shot at it at any time, because I think, like Treasurer Nelson said, you write policy and you make policy, so you can take a stab at it anytime you want.
So we had, when I was in Oakland, we worked on an equity pledge to overcome challenges we had with our charter authorization. There had been lots of rumors about who was doing what, and so we started with an overarching kind of belief document that we all believe in educating special education students. And then, so it was probably an 8 to 10 belief statement document, of which then we were able to build KPIs and influence sub-policies underneath it. So one of the real takeaways was the challenge that comes with enrollment, the flushing of kids after count day. And so we came up with an agreement that it wasn't, say, October 10th or whatever it was in California. It wasn't October 10th. If you were an authorized district in Oakland Unified and you moved a kid out after October, there was a proportional rate of the FTE that went with the child. Because it wasn't good for the district to constantly take kids on October 12th, 13th, 14th, and 15th, because charters were just holding on to them to count day. So anyway, I use as an example, not because of a charter issue, but I think this idea of KC, what was it called?
KB. Parent.
I never understand the nomenclature. What's the K stand for?
K is all of our policies that fall into it.
Okay. I think we could maybe modify that and get a couple of two-way belief statements that say, children succeed when parents are active in school settings. We all believe that. How do we create a set of expectations of what that means from the district, as well as what parents want in that? And I'll just end on the one thing I share all the time. I think every American student in high school that's in a U.S. history class should see one of the most awful movies of any of the war genres that they're studying. Saving Private Ryan, Apocalypse Now, The Deer Hunter. You can go to All Quiet on the Western Front was a new one on Netflix. But most of them are rated NC-17. And if a parent doesn't want their child to see an NC-17 movie, I can get the learning objective done without making them see the movie. So I want kids to be able to have that access. But if a parent isn't comfortable with that, I don't want them to feel like they have to be a homeschooled family or a parochial school family. We should have ways that families are able to tell us what are the things that they're comfortable with. And so I think that's getting to this center of what is a movement and what is a personal choice. I think parents want to be in that space. I grew up, in the 80s, and I remember the 6 kids who didn't go to sex education. I don't know if they were more promiscuous, less promiscuous. I don't know what their marital status is right now. I know that this same conversation happened in the 80s, just over a different topic. Parents have choices. Those parents did not pull their kids out of public school. They just went to study hall 3 days a week when we had sex ed. So I think starting with an overarching piece, and I kind of leave that to the board maybe to design on what you all are thinking about that. And then it holds us from a policy perspective of what are the things that have to happen below that. Instead of constantly chasing the things, we have how many overall policies?
400?
Well, policy wise, we're down to about 2.
Still, we will exhaust ourselves in trying to meet every parent's need from either end of the spectrum in policy. Come up with a belief statement that all parents feel that they could be a part of that.
So that's something what Director, what Superintendent Gall is talking about.
I am running for school board. So
Are you? You have to give up your salary, you know, you get paid.
I don't know, does the bylaws say that? It just says you have to be.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. I would love to take that on. I enjoy policy. It's kind of, I didn't know that about myself until being in this role, but I do enjoy it.
Okay, is the board okay with that, Director Nelson is going to take a stab at
I'm gonna have
what
to read 250 policies, or whatever they are.
just a belief statement like what is, it's a two-way partnership.
Commitment.
Yeah, my little book.
Yeah.
That's all I need is that little book.
Director Loma, I'm just getting a pulse of the board. If what Superintendent Gong talked about, a belief statement where we include parents in the student's education and we also expect something back from the parents. Is that something, a two-way statement, something like that?
We can put it up
Either
there.
put as part of policy KB or a parent, he said equity pledge, but a
Or
parent.
we can
pledge.
recognize the parent right next to the board of priorities.
Okay, is that interest, okay, Director Art.
I would say we should review the policies we have first, obviously, it seems to me, and make sure it doesn't already exist in there, just for starters.
Is there a policy in your, you are the policy expert out there, is there a policy that addresses that, Dr. X, what the two-way partnership with parents that, what Superintendent?
Policy committee has some of those elements, but does not have expanded language like Superintendent Gall.
Okay, so let's start with policy KB. Okay, if you can also provide the board with one of the, send it to the board where it is right now, what that current version of it is, and if a board member and Director Nelson offered to take, it'll collectively come in front of the board at some point in time. Whether that is, you can look at that policy, look at the language in that policy and figure out if that is going to be part of that or a parent pledge that we want to, whatever it is, just come up with something and then circle back to the board at some point in time at a work session. You let me know and we can put that as a work session. Is that okay with the board? Thumbs up on that. Okay, I have 1, 2, 3.
I just have doubts about how you ask parents to, I want us to engage them, absolutely. But as a parent, I'm gonna be engaged whether or not you ask me for a pledge. And it just, that I just, as a parent, I don't think I'd be interested in that. I'm gonna be engaged or not, and no pledge from the district, that just seems to me like extra work for me, so.
Well, it is, nothing is being adopted. She's just going to look at the language and it's going to come in front of the board.
Yeah.
And so for you to categorically say, without even looking at a document, we don't need parenting. I'm talking about the document she would work on and revise and bring it back to the board at that point.
I think we can tie some of this together to what we see with the charters that we've been engaging with and what we see with even with the opportunity schools data that you shared. Active choice into a situation creates a different type of relationship. And we have talked, David and I have talked about over the next coming years, do we shift, even though boundaries still exist, do we shift to 100% choice for every enrolled seat? Do we ask every parent to make an active choice that says, I'm taking my children to Martinez? Now, you do take your children to Martinez, but the process of a two-way conversation that says, yay, we got Martinez, we're ready to go. That we had so much pressure and stress in DC on high-quality seats that we went to a 100% lottery system. And there was a lot of fear of inequity. A lottery is a lottery, it is random as it can be. But what we actually saw was acceleration in parent engagement in those first short years afterwards because they got something.
Voice.
They're like, these are my first 3 school choices that I can provide transportation to or that fits the district's transportation model. We're in, we got that school. And so I just think often about, my own children as they were going through their own college applications. They certainly had the #1 school they wanted to get to, but the choice and then the acceptance of created a different dynamic instead of you live here so you're going there. And I think it would be interesting for us to just try and activate instead of constantly hearing about people who get choice being happy with choice and then everyone else complaining that they couldn't exercise choice. Every child in our school right now is there by choice, but only the 25% that are moving across borders feel like they're making an active choice. And I was at Doherty today, and one of the students was telling me why she chose to come to Doherty. And then other students were just at Doherty. And it was a much different engagement level with the student who said why they were at Doherty as compared to the other students who were at Doherty.
Reminds me of the conversation I had with that foreign exchange student, how that student wanted to take every opportunity that was there at Doherty. She made the choice to come there. And going back to Director Art's it's a parent pledge. Not only we are asking parents to pledge, it is also the district pledging what is it that we want to be. It's a two-way street that we are talking about. Okay. So if you want to take on that and circle back with the board at some point in time and let us know. With that, we move on to the whistleblower policy, I know that to set up some context, this came in front of the board a while back as a non-action item. We could not get to it that evening because it was getting late. And this is a brand new policy that I remember Director Jurgensen asking for it and some of our employee groups asking for it too. And so you have a version of the policy right now. So since it's a brand new policy, instead of trying to dissect it on the board dais, this would be a better setting. And maybe you can give some context where we are at this time and then go from there.
Yeah, as President Malpaka mentioned, Policy GBC is a new policy being introduced to the board. It is the product of collaborative work by district employee groups. And the intent of the policy was to cover those who blow the whistle on matters of public concern. Currently, there is a federal whistleblower law, the Whistleblower Protection Act, WPA. However, that only applies to federal employees. There are also two state laws in the state of Colorado. One protects state employees who work in state agencies, and the other one protects employees who work in private agencies. So federal and state law do not cover school district. So there currently is no CASB recommendation for a GBC whistleblower policy. And we do have some internal mechanisms for that, where we have systems already in place for concerns to be brought forward to the staff, chain of command and line of staff relations. We have some existing policies to address some of those issues. So that being said, it's introduced tonight. It did go to the policy committee on 11/11 and then was on the board agenda as mentioned, but was held over because of time constraints that night so that we could spend some time taking a look at it this evening. So I open it up for any questions or comments. I do also have Director Nash here for representing the executive professionals and can speak to some of the collaborative work of how it might have been developed. The policy is pretty much borrowed as a draft from the Federal Department of Education's sample whistleblower policy.
So
I have a question.
I will come to you. Okay, go ahead, Director.
I read through all of that and it seems that, and in hearing that a lot of folks were contributing to this and using federal state guidelines. Have we run it through our own legal team, Deb Matkins and that group?
We had an initial discussion with Ms. Mankins, and we are moving in the process of putting any draft back in front of her to review for those reasons.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the last part of what you just said.
Once we make some revisions this evening, we will make sure to submit any changes to Ms. Mankins. Throughout the process, she has been providing guidance.
Thank you.
or questions on the policy itself, Director Ross.
Thanks. Mostly it's might be a regulation question. When I finished reading it, I kind of felt like, how does a person go about blowing the whistle, as it were? And I'm not sure it's really communicated in here. The protections are, so does it need a regulation or something out there on the website that says, here's how you do it? Yeah, here's the steps to take?
The policy committee did add some language that they felt that there was some retaliation, that it would go to human resources or to EEOC. And this policy kind of gives an umbrella over all of our other reporting policies. So if I were to look at a discrimination or harassment complaint under AC, and that wasn't done, or there hadn't been a solution to that addressed, I then moved up the line, that hadn't been addressed, and then I whistleblow, then this would be the protection of, once I did whistleblow, I feel like I've been retaliated against, and that's what that protects.
Okay, so they're essentially, like, the how-to would be, you're saying in the AC or some of the other policies?
Yes, because we have, when we talk about, for example, reporting employee misconduct with fiscal resources or fraud, that's in policy DO already.
DO?
DO, yeah.
Yep, okay. I'm looking at the list there and trying to place which one's which. Okay. All right, that makes sense to me. Thank you.
Go ahead.
I feel that this needs a objective statement or a scope statement, because when I read through it, I don't fully understand when this applies versus when DO would apply. And so I think it would be really beneficial to add at the very top, this is the purpose, the scope, the objective of this document. And then I would like to see kind of like what the process would be of, we have DO, but if I'm an employee and I think something's going on, I might not realize to go to DO first and just pull up whistleblower. And then I think there needs to be very clear direction on, do they go to the superior first? If it's about their superior, do they go to the next person? Or is it they go straight to the superintendent? Because that is in here more towards the bottom of the document, and I think that needs to be raised up higher, that that's, our ask, assuming the superintendent is involved and it specifies that, but
So like a whistleblower process.
yes, it needs a process of like, here's the steps you take, and also specifying like, if you take it to the superintendent, then in my mind, the responsibility isn't mine anymore, it's on him. And there needs to be time for him to be able to respond and act. And if he doesn't, then I'm gonna go to the authorities myself. And so we need to specify that as well, like how much
Process with
time.
timelines.
Yeah, how much time should he get to act? Otherwise, it could be, I drop my letter off to Mr.
Open-ended.
Gall, and then I'm gonna pick up the phone and call the news. And like, we would handle it, but there wasn't time to do so, and that sort of thing, so that's my.
It addresses some of that in 7A, 7B, or whatever it is in that policy. The concern that I have is how are the employees not required to submit a written report if he or she believes with reasonable certainty that the activity, policy, or practice is already known to the superintendent. So what's reasonable certainty for them? I mean, did they just, as they were discussing it, the superintendent walked past them and they assumed that the superintendent heard the conversation, and that's reasonable certainty to them, or that an emergency is involved? My idea of an emergency could be very different than Director Loma's idea of emergency. So we just need some clarity on when is it. We certainly want to provide protections for our staff, but when is it that they go through the internal district channels to address some improprieties that are taking place within the district? And when is it that they feel like, okay, we have exhausted the internal things and nothing is happening, and now we need to go to the outside source or whatever.
That would be the timeline, if
Yeah.
it's not done within the
Yeah,
time.
I mean, we just don't want that, and also, there's got to be a certain amount of factual evidence or whatever it is that they are got to go. We just don't want like, okay, I'm going to start a malicious, I don't think any of our staff are going to do that, but we just want to make sure our policy doesn't allow that a staff can go to the press right away and start something, and then now they come back and say, I'm protected under whistleblower policy, even if that what they reported is found to be not credible at all, and it was not justified in any way, scope, or form. Somehow so the basic easy thing would be for you to follow up with legal, at least follow up with legal and see if the language in here follows legal muster, and what is it, where we can tighten up the language, maybe provide some, clear directions for our staff. When is it that they can go, when is it not they can go, and we want to provide this. This came from all our staff and also from Director Jurgensen himself a year back. So those are some of the concerns. Anything else so let's go to legal. That's what I would say. At least take it back to legal and get some clarity and on that.
So what if, okay, just to that end, okay, what if he established that policy like he wished, and they broke it? They went a different way. Is there a repercussion, or are you gonna delineate that, or we don't touch that?
Like if they don't follow the process
Right.
and they go, I mean, that's legal, we gotta ask
You
them,
know what I mean? You
you
have to
know?
find out.
Yeah.
So if you put a policy, but there's no teeth, then you might as well not write anything.
Okay, is everybody okay with Dr. X consulting legal and coming back, and then once you've gotten through legal, then we can talk about at that time whether it has to come back at a work session or can it come directly as a non-action item on the board agenda? Okay.
I wonder if we might ask Tanya if she has any additions to the conversation or observations.
Do you want to
about
come and join us, or
session.
you okay talking from there, whatever works for you?
Just as a part of the meet and confer and board for our executive professionals, this was an item that came up in our meet and confer process last year. So it is something that we feel we would like to see in place. I fully understand the conversation and the idea of how does this function, and that was some of the conversation that we did have at policy. There was lots of question and delineation of when something would, like when does it make it a whistleblower kind of an event? So those are things that were discussed there. I think it's great for make sure that it is very clear. Because I think what would happen is if you were to adopt this, then I know from our employee group, it would be important for us to be able to clearly communicate how this would function and what other pieces are part of the processes. Because we do have some questions that come up around what do I do in this situation and what is my pathway to have this conversation.
It's gonna come to you guys all the time.
They usually ask for some
Yeah.
guidance.
Yeah.
That makes sense to me. Okay.
Okay, any more
you.
thoughts on this? So what we heard, Diana Nelson suggested how did you put a purpose statement? Yes, right at the very beginning that says when it is DO and when it is this or something to that nature, and then a legal consultation on what the language in this policy as to what this is, and make sure that that is okay with legal before it comes in front of the board. You had something more?
Oh, I was just gonna ask, so when I look at the first paragraph, to me, it outlines its purpose essentially, so I wondered what you might add.
How is it different than DO?
Well, DO I think is, so I'm gonna go look at the title.
I did look
Right.
a little at DO.
Reporting, so that's reporting the employee misconduct. But this is specific, I think it's broader, and it speaks to protection.
So I guess, in which I totally get, it's the protection piece, so maybe I feel there's the piece missing of when it comes into play versus DO and what the process is or what the steps are. So the protection piece is great, we absolutely want to provide that, but if I'm an employee and I think something's going on, I would, my personality or just verbiage, I would think whistleblower policy, I'm gonna go to whistleblower policy. I would not think, I'm gonna go to whatever DO is called. Like, that's not gonna come to my mind. It's called reporting employee misconduct involving district resources. And it's not like they're together in the policy deck. That one's DO, this is GBC. So I would just go straight to whistleblower, because I'm like, I have a problem here. I'm gonna blow the whistle. I would not, so I just think there should be very clear guidance.
Or at least directions to where you can find the guidance, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and some of that, I mean, I can see illegal, somewhere where it's violation of policy, but it's just the broad language in the first 4 statement. It says otherwise improper. What is improper? That's what I think is improper could very well be, hey, this is proper practice. So just getting some clarity on this language, just making it a little bit tighter, talking to legal about this. I have another thing, like in the 6A and B or whatever it is that out there, it seems like it says we don't have to compensate the employees for participating in it, and then it doesn't prohibit us from compensating our employees either. It just seems like both are contradicting each other. Either, hey, we don't need to pay, if we want to, we will pay them. I don't know what the intent of that language was in putting both that in place. If we say, hey, we are not going to pay our employees for participating in court action or investigation, leave it at that. And then so then is it up to the discretion of administration to decide? Sometimes they pay and sometimes they don't pay. Those are some notes I had jotted down.
I think it leaves options open.
Right, then let's not put anything at all. So we, just don't put anything, then it is. But right now we have thing that says, do not require the district to compensate, and then do not prohibit the district from compensating. So who makes that decision has to, whether a person compensates or does not compensate. Does it follow the superintendent? Does it follow on the department head? There is.
That's management.
Okay,
Yeah.
right, that's what I'm saying. To me, let's remove the language and then, but anyway, I would say consult legal. Instead of me providing that response to you, or the board members trying to provide that response, let's have legal review this and come back and let us know. Maybe it's one or the other. Okay, we don't need 6A and B, both in there. Okay, anything further on this topic? Okay, so at some point in time, consult legal, come back to the board. Depending on the revisions and the what has been suggested by legal. And maybe we need to have legal here in this conversation too, at the work session, if we are going to do that. If legal thinks that they got to be part of that conversation. If they are proposing some modifications or revisions, then maybe it's the legal coming in, being part of the conversation. Just circle back and let me know, then we can schedule. The idea being that before the end of the school year, we would like to adopt this policy. I think there is hopefully consensus on that by when we break up for summer break, that's middle of June. So if you can circle back and get that legal input and come back before, in the next month or so. Okay. Okay, thank you. With that, we are officially at the end of the board meeting. Superintendent Gall mentioned before you guys take off, Superintendent Gall mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, or during the course of the meeting, it's John McCarron's birthday. So yes. Collectively from the board, happy birthday, John. And on the same note, I would also like to say early birthday news to Superintendent Gall, whose birthday is it tomorrow. So
39.
39 again.
Just
so
wish my hair would have stayed.
Yeah. So thank you
Thank
for
you.
all that you do too, and hope you have a wonderful day engaging in our schools and you're not taking the day off.
No, I'm not. And just as an update for the board, the crossing walk for the school zone at Doherty is up and operational.
Yep, I saw that this morning.
So if any of you are interacting with any members of the city government, please extend that appreciation for quick action in spite of the tragedy that caused it.
We are
Operational on Monday.
Was that
Monday?
on Monday?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought I saw the light flashing today. Maybe it was just tested.
We might just be having some fun with it, but
Okay.
yeah, Monday.
We are officially adjourned at 7:48 p.m.